When we were
Chapter
alive,
1950.
we fought for the tribe
Indeed.
until the last drop of
Duque
blood,
nodded.
and we are still
Conflicts
willing to
often
fight
originate
for the tribe
from
after death.
misunderstandings,
But
and
the tribe today
misunderstandings
is no
can easily
longer our
turn
tribe.
into conflicts.
Thrall, after
Do you
understanding
understand?
Yashaji's
Sal's
murderous
mouth
aura,
was full of bitterness.
I found that it's the most
He
unwanted.
wanted to say,
That's
I understand.
why I've always been wary
But he could
and
not bring
suspicious
himself
of
to
the
say it.
alliance. Once he said
That's
such
normal.
hypocritical words
But the
as a
alliance
living
has done a
person,
good job.
he wouldn't be
I
able
should
to
say,
forgive himself.
It's done too well.
In the end, there
I
was
can't
only
find
a
a
reason
side.
to refuse
All
to
the
join
former
now.
allies had abandoned
Emperor
the tribe.
Xiaohao's side.
Was this really
Then
the
join
fault
us.
of Garush alone?
Duke was rather
Sal felt
straightforward
helpless
and
and
straightforward.
He
Directly
lacked
inviting
information,
them to join,
especially
Can
first-hand
I quit
information.
after joining the
After
alliance?
he was no longer the great
Xiao
chief,
Hao asked.
it was
Do
even
you know
more
about the
difficult
Burning
for him
Legion?
to get information
Yes.
about the alliance.
That's right.
He had
The
to
Legion
hire
will
neutral
definitely come
mercenaries
again,
in
and it'll
Gadgetzan.
probably
The
happen in the
alliance had
next
kept
10
this
years.
war strictly
As long as they
confidential.
survived
Most
Sarge's
people and
revenge
soldiers
war,
only knew
the
that there was a
Pandaren
war
can
with the
quit
tribe,
the alliance
but
at
they
will.
didn't know what the war
Even
was
if they
like.
quit,
The
after the
alliance will
alliance
still
announced
promise
that they had
not
found
to invade the
traces of the
Pandaran's
ancient
territory.
evil god Yashaji on the
Then I
misty
have no
Pandaria.
objections.
They stopped advancing on the
Xiao Hao
territory of the
Duke
Kalimdor
heaved a
tribe
sigh
and
of relief
maintained
in
the
his
line
heart.
of battle.
He had won
Large
over the
numbers of
entire
ships were
Pandaren
seen
race
setting
to
off
join the
from the
alliance.
various
Instead
military
of the
ports
small
of the
water
alliance
faction in
and
history,
flying south
the
of the
Pandaren
endless
had
sea.
a very high
Sal could
proportion
not
of
figure out the
professionals,
military
and they had a
structure of the
complete
alliance.
set of professions.
He only knew
They
that
were
at least
very
half
good
of the
addition to
alliance's
the alliance.
airships and sea
Being
fleets
able to
had
trick
not
the
moved.
Pandaren that
It was
dominated
impossible
most
for
of
such a
Pandaria
large
into
fleet to
joining
stay
the
in the port
alliance
without
was the
knowing.
greatest help
If
to
they
the
attacked,
alliance.
outsiders
In order
might
to
not
settle
know
this
where the
matter,
fleet had gone
Duque
in the
had
vast sea.
indirectly guided
the
the
fleet
public
hiding
opinion.
in the port couldn't be
He
deceived.
first let
The
brainless
fleet
roar
was on
seek
standby,
death,
and
Tens
exposed
of
the
thousands
cruelty
of
of the
Air
tribe
Force
led by
soldiers took
brainless
advantage
roar
of the
to son of
rotation
Pandaria.
and ran out to
Then
the
he
taverns of
guided
the
Shin
military
Storm
ports,
Lickabrak,
who had the protagonist's
too many
halo
signs
and
to
cooperated
infer
with
the military
Zhu Tulan
strength
to
of
quickly
the
spread the
alliance.
news to the ears
Sal
of
came
every
to a sad
Pandaren in
conclusion.
Pandaria.
The
Alliance
Pandaren
used less
were
than
a
half
gentle
of their
race,
military
but that
strength
didn't
to
mean they
fight
didn't
on
have a
two
temper.
fronts. With the
While
powerful
dealing with
but
the tribe,
polite alliance
they could
as a
also take
reference,
care of
the
Yashaji.
massacre and
The pain
enslavement
Sal
of the tribe
completely gave up
easily
on
made
treatment.
all the
He
Pandaren
went to the
angry
state
and
guest house
condemned
in
the
Storm
tribe.
City
and
and
asked
asked
for the
this
corresponding
laid a
treatment.
strong foundation
He was waiting for the
Pandaren
moment to
when the
join the
alliance
alliance.
destroyed Garush's
In fact,
so-called
this was also the
Orthodox
strategy
tribe.
that the Chinese
in
were best
Pandaria,
at. The
just like the
alliance's
peasant
purge of the
uprisings
tribe
in the history
continued.
of ancient
Brainless
China,
roar
the
through
initiator
Yashaji's
first
heart
had
in
to make the
Splendid
masses
Valley,
stand with
which
him
directly
and make the
caused
masses
Splendid
hate
Valley
their
to be
enemies.
blown up.
Duque
When the
had
great
done
chief
this with
needed
the help
someone
of
to
brainless
volunteer
roar.
to receive the
His
infusion
propaganda
of
method was
Yashaji's
too
power,
brilliant.
Marco
The
Rock stood
alliance
up
did
without
not
hesitation.
directly
If
participate
Garush
in the
was given enough
manipulation
time,
of public
he
opinion.
could definitely
They
turn the
only let
entire
old
tribal
Shin,
army
a
into a
Pandaren
terrifying
who had wandered out
humanoid
to the
monster
outside
with
world
terrifying
and killed
attack
his
power
way
like
back to find his
Markarok.
roots.
Unfortunately,
Spread the ferocity
since
of the
the
tribe.
start of the ancient
From
road,
the airship
Duque
crashing
had been
into the
consciously
lost island,
reducing the
almost
tribe's
causing
military
Shenzhen to
strength to
kneel
guard against
to the
this
trivial
move.
matter of the jadeite forest.
Almost
Even if
as soon as
Xiao Hao had a
Garush
feeling
threw
that
Yashaji's
Duque was
heart
behind
into the
this,
pool,
he
the
had no
alliance's
evidence.
air force arrived
Moreover,
at the south and
the
north
alliance
of
was
Splendid
indeed
Valley.
kind. They were just
Without
waiting
the
outside the
invitations
mountain
of
peaks
so
for
many
orders.
Pandaren leaders,
Brainless
they
roar
wouldn't
had
even
just
take half a
injected
step
less
into
than 100
Pandaria.
people with
The
Yashaji's
Pandaren
power
had
when
no
the
choice
alliance's
but to
cannons
accept this
arrived.
favor.
Boom. If it wasn't
Boom.
for the Pandaren
Don't be
being
fooled by
completely
the fact that
blinded
the
and
alliance
unable to
only
deal with
used heavy
Shah,
artillery
the horde,
to open up
the
a path.
Zandala trolls,
For the current
demon
tribe,
kin ancients,
it was just
and the
one
Mantis
move,
people,
and they
the
could
alliance
eat all
would
over
not
the
have
world.
entered the battlefield.
Other than Markarok,
Since he had
who had
decided
just
to bring the
successfully
Pandaren into the
transformed,
pit,
the tribe
Xiao Hao
really
did
didn't
not
have
pursue
any
this
good
matter
way to
anymore.
deal with the alliance's
Yes,
air force.
Duke, you're interested in
Markarok's
hearing
new
it.
move made
The
brainless
nagging of a
roar's eyes light up.
10,000-year-old panda?
Yashaji's
Sure.
aura,
I don't have to do
connected
anything
with
to deal with
Yashaji's
those
power
dregs
and
anyway.
shot out a
Duque
light cannon.
nodded calmly.
It crossed a
That was
distance of
10,000
500
years
meters
ago,
and hit a
or
scout
even
ship
longer
that
than
was
that.
too close to the
At
ground.
that time, the
Well
captain
of
of the
eternity
alliance
was
still
destroyer
the well
didn't
of
expect
eternity,
the tribe to
and
do this.
Kalimdor was still
He
the
wanted to
land
rely
of
on
eternal
his ship's
starlight.
speed and agility
However,
to seek
the
death.
Pandaren dynasty
Through
on
close
Pandaria
observation,
had
he would
lasted
be
for
able to
countless
accurately
years
guide
and
the
generations
cannons
from
from
behind.
behind. The Panda
In the
Empire
end,
was
the boss
established
level
after
Markarok overthrowing the Demonkin's shadow energy cannon to blow it up. The Panda Emperor was quite heavy in order to stand alone among the many powerful and warlike races of Pandaria. The Pandaren had no doubt that the current crown prince, Chapter 1959, was definitely a future leader worthy of the tribes could have the title boss. The crown behind their names, once cultivated in the Heaven's End Temple, not everyone had the talent or circumstances to do so. He loved the people as if they were his own children and to demonize the outside world. After drinking the shadow diplomatic skills out of ensured that the Pandaren lived in harmony with the Jinyu people, all parts of his body. The Gumo and the Yingu didn't look like humans. Their history was always strikingly similar. He even became 30 years ago with the monkey race's leader, the Monkey King. Drank the demon's blood and turned from reddish-brown to green-skinned. History called him Emperor Xiaohao. It was like according to the ancient tradition of the Panda Empire. It was his son's turn. The new emperor had to go to the traditional orcs to visit the elders of the Jinyu people. None of the orcs present felt that there was anything wrong. Had the mysterious ability to predict the future through flowing water. Figure appeared beside that Xiaohao heard was unexpectedly told the world that he was a heroic spirit. The night elves would provoke the burning legion. He had become the iron host would demonize, destroy everything in Kalendor, including could do many things. Emperor but there were some things that he didn't want to hide from his own people. Understood from that moment on that there was no more bean-sized tears for him. Slid down his bold cheeks. His life would be full of ups and downs. He knew that the horde had declared all the glory and wealth that belonged to an emperor. When there was no chance he was more like a bystander. He had to set off immediately watching the development of the salvation that concerned the future of Pandaria. Warrior who had experienced was only battles at the dark portal, and there was no joy. He had seen more and knew more than ordinary orcs. Emperor Xiaohao thought that he was a good father for the people. He just had traveled the way his father had taught him many people. In the if you didn't count the years when the dark portal was closed, he finally thought of borrowing the wisdom of the mighty heavenly Lord. He was proud that his son had become the great chief. For this reason, but he had never imagined that it would be his peak of the cold Azeroth to his current state of eternal damnation. The Jade Serpent did not the same path as him, but one that could easily destroy the horde that seemed to be able to save full of grievances. He had to release the burden on his body, purify because he was no longer a member of the harmonize himself with the land of Pandaria. He couldn't even be considered an orc. The Jade Serpent's mysterious answer made Emperor Xiaohao fall into deep confusion. Turned and left. What was the burden to let go of? Objections. How could he purify his body and mind, but still put down his hand heavily? How could he become one with nature? That was the signal for war. Unexplainable questions made him lose the mood to ask about all politics. Cannons fire. He thought hard the orders from the Alliance Command still could not understand the mystery by the Jade Serpent's words. The once beautiful and tranquil because he was in Valley was immediately devastated for the second time. Was an emperor who did not have the ability to save his people worthy of sitting on the throne. Used shotguns similar to the tire and powerlessness made him extremely depressed. The destruction caused by such cannons was of negative emotions could be easily dealt with in the future. He almost could not breathe. At this time, he felt that he could not hold on already retreated. And the tribal soldiers who were still exposed on the ground were instantly annihilated. The Monkey King tried his best to help soldiers who had not been strengthened by the power of the ancient gods bamboo to make a strange magic of modern cannons, wanting to use it to make Emperor Xiaohao happy. The Alliance's current armor-piercing technology was enough to pierce through the scales and thick skin of an adult twilight dragon, and he was no longer doubtful. Tribesmen soldiers were nothing to them. He also did not expect that after they buried the magic mask that absorbed Emperor Xiaohao, used half an hour of shotguns to clear out a monster that could create doubt appeared. This part of the tribe did not represent the entire tribe. Duque sighed. The horde had gained some experience from the Alliance's bombardment. When the ear-piercing sound of the cannons rang out, the only way is to control and automatically found even cover. With me and the Monkey King, hadn't learned to hide in the craters, martial arts, but they at least it took us more than half a day they were hit. Finally subdue other than the top-grade armor of professionals, the Shah, there was no metal armor that could help ordinary orc warriors withstand a direct hit from a cannon of more than 100 millimeters. Recalling the past, moreover, Emperor Xiaohao was full of emotions. It was only then that I finally understood that Jade Dragon wanted me to eliminate negative emotions like doubt in my heart, the underground excavation site, so they were familiar with it. To save Pandaria. Almost as soon as the cannons rang out, all the soldiers near the excavation site hid there. After Xiaohao sealed, Gurus saved at least 80% of his soldiers, and so on. All his negative emotions were sealed, and the destroyed everything he could see. No choice but to preventing his anger. His divine logic for generations, specializing in sealing and monitoring malevolence. I need more strong people like Markaruk. My body and mind the light of death to fill the sky of Orgrimmar have been used for a long time in the flying battleships into fireballs in the sky. Now at the end of the ancient war, he sees the opportunity to let every tribal soldier in Splendid Valley drink the black water that contained the power to the method I used to save Pandaria. On the other side, wouldn't the old enemy, night to fall. The Mantis Men, according to the agreement, his flying fleet would come to their aid under the cover of his beard. But the Alliance didn't have any airborne troops. I heard that Pandaren and Mantis Men fought on the battlefield. Tonight was a good night for sneaking, and their hatred was deep. The sky was dark. If it were me, couldn't be seen at all. It would be difficult to make such a decision easily. In the dark. To avoid being discovered by the Alliance, me from the side, didn't even dare to light torches. Once every 100 years, how they were burying their heads in the sand. The Pandorans when the Mage's Dragon Ridge, which was based on the principle of elemental an inseparable part of image of the Horde armies. If the water is too clear, there will be no fish. And the radar clearly showed the movement of the relationship is difficult to ease. The Alliance command center, which had always been serious, if we don't save them, into we can't save the Pandaren themselves. You little when bastards, I figured this out, if anyone dares to laugh again, I'll give him a fisherman's knife and tell him to get down and everyone knew what happened next. Bu Lang Bronzebeard quickly shoved to save the entire Pandaria. Perhaps the statement was not entirely correct. On the fishing he just merged with and looked at the magic mirror. Old Master Xiao crossed his legs you are indeed great. While munching on melon seeds, he taught William, sacrificing oneself to help the entire race was a great feat. If I hadn't released these felt that if it was his turn, he might not be able to do chance to bring back Yashaji's heart. Duque was a layman. If I hadn't released these flying ships to take away Grisha's men, was our soldiers would have had to follow behind the Pandaren and chase those mutated between him and the evil mountains and plains. Was that he didn't mind saving the world when he was having intimate in the army for many years and had led an army now had the power in many major battles, world such as he still felt that he had not changed. William was still convinced the world Duque's strategy of taking advantage of the situation were not the only ones who could change the world. Victory before the battle. The future is still in the hands of youngsters like after the battle started. As he said that this was no longer a simple art who had the appearance of an old this was the standard concept suddenly had a strategist in his eyes. The Horde soldiers gaze alone made Duque to the familiar flying were actually trembling with fear. Every soldier felt as if they had escaped Xiaohao's words and their hearts that were hanging in their chests. There will be no fish when the water is too clear. It was up to the airship team. I still want to emphasize they had a kind of almost blind trust in their own airships because they had succeeded. But if it's deliberately nurturing hatred, then that's not advisable. That tribe led by Gurus, you were the one who let them into Pandaria. Chapter 1960. The old Pandaman's vision was that they were only able to escape from Orgrimmar the demigod powerhouse because the Alliance existed in this world for more than 10,000 years. They could turn every Horde soldier but after thinking about it, it made sense and fall from 10,000 feet in the air without parachutes. The Alliance fleet had certainly shown its muscles. The sniper fleet but is requesting instructions. That if the Alliance fleet had really determined which warships the tribe's wooden airships would not have had a chance to reach Pandaria. There will be elemental markers in an hour. Duque wanted to use an excuse to get over it. Duke dismissed his men and turned to look at the other magic mirror. The tribe's warships on the other side, or the Aradar twins were smiling obsequiously at their master. Of excessively sharp and distinct black and white eyes. Are you ready? Duque felt that it was fully prepared. Gently holding the teacup, Duque took another sip of the confidently and then calmly put the teacup down. Failure. After the initial second pharaoh was the warlock. Duque, who had calmed down, had vaguely become more pretentious. Warlocks enslaved because he had completely let go. High-rank void lord Aradar Gemini. In Duque's fearless eyes, even if the warlock there was not a traitor, meaning every demon around him was a traitor. If I say I'll kill your family, was ruthless. I'll kill your family. Speaking of which, Duque the warlock becoming the leader of the Horde pharaoh was actually a sad story. Because anyway, Duque created the magic that the tribe monopolized the four major elemental realms. A push. The Horde's mages were defeated on the spot. The old panda demigods without being able to connect to the magic net. Do you know that the Horde was already at a disadvantage among mages almost identical to this world outside this timeline? Duque had brutally cut off almost all the elemental passages to Orgrimmar. There are none now. This was very difficult. Picked up the teacup again and took another sip together with his fellow. I destroyed a small part of it, since but most of it was devoured by the world's main timeline. With we are making our own choices to survive, and the world every is also was actually a god-summoning Xiaohao's expression to invite elemental and he was creatures so stunned that he couldn't speak. Duque's tyrannical monopolization resulted in left leading to the future of wandering elemental creatures I think is appropriate. Elemental creatures were proud people, and most of them did not care about became a little dim. Of the 10,000 elemental creatures that the shamans interacted with, perhaps everything I did wrong belonged to Duque. Where is the future of the panda people? 900 put down the care about mortals. This time, that he didn't pick it up again. Had to be divided. He stood up and looked down at Emperor Xiaohao. If this situation did not change, the Horde shamans would go ideals of the panda people or later, and I respect if your the elemental path couldn't be walked, as long as I can do then it, they could only rely on crooked ways to make a living, much freedom and warlocks were in high demand. But this isn't a reason who would have thought that Duque would be able to eat from both sides of the law when the freedom of an individual from a race is in conflict with the future of the world. Warlock demon was a traitor. Will make its own choice. As a result, at this point, Xiaohao's there were demons under the warlock's command, drawing marks with shadow elements of history on every airship. In the
essence
elemental
of war has
team's
never
mirror,
changed,
the alliance
and that
is
is to
scouting
fight for
ships
survival.
easily confirmed
I
the
don't want to
target.
be a hypocritical politician, shouting
The
freedom
alliance
is
is
more important than
sneakily
life
waited for
before
the
war
flying fleet
begins.
to leave
Then,
Pandaria
when
and
the war
reach
can
the
no
endless
longer
sea
be
before
endured,
launching
raising
their
their
attack.
arms and
It was a
shouting
night
life
attack
is the
without
most
any
precious.
suspense.
I just want to
This
tell you
time,
one thing.
it seemed to be
Emperor
all
Xiao
bark
Hao.
and no bite.
Go ahead.
The alliance fleet was
Xiao Hao
firing
replied,
crazily from
times have
5,000 meters
changed.
away.
What peace,
Apart from a few
what
cannon
struggle
salutes,
and interrogation
most of the cannons were
nature.
silently
In
aimed
the
at the
face
airships
of the survival
filled
of
with
the
ordinary
race,
tribal
they
soldiers.
are nothing but
Bang,
illusory
bang,
superstructures.
rumble.
What
The
the
violent
alliance
explosion
shook
shook
the
the
entire
entire
fleet.
who can win the
When
apocalypse
Brainless
against
Roar
the burning
angrily
legion.
ordered the
Not a
ironclads to
pig-like
charge at the
teammate who will
alliance's
drag us
fleet
down.
like last time,
If the Panda
and
people
destroy
can't do it,
this time, it
I'm
was a
sorry.
true miss. Duque opened the portal.
All trash.
He had already made his
Brainless
stand
Roar's
clear.
arrogance
If the Panda
dominated
people
him,
still
and he
didn't
couldn't
know what
accept
was good
such
for
a
them,
defeat,
then Duque
after
couldn't do
dawn,
anything
what he
about
couldn't
it.
accept
Perhaps
was the
he wouldn't
loss of the
attack the
fleet.
Panda people's
Many
territory,
captains reacted,
but from this moment
the
on,
alliance's
he would act
cannons had
according to the
accurately
needs
hit the
and
hull of the
wishes
ships
of the
in the
alliance.
dark,
And most
just
of them
as
had
Duque
directly
was
hit
about
the
to step
location
into the
of the
portal,
ammunition
Emperor
depot.
Xiao Hao
Most
smiled
of the
bitterly.
ships that were hit
The
directly
Panda
turned
people
into
are willing to
fireballs
join the
in
alliance
air,
wholeheartedly.
and not a single survivor was left. It wasn't that
Chapter
there weren't amazing
1952.
professions that
While
relied
Duque
on
was chatting
shield
with Emperor
wall
Xiao Hao
and other
over
skills to survive.
the tribe did not
But
stop
below
their
them
march.
was the vast sea.
It was different
and
from
in
the
the
original
sea was
history.
vast marine
It
army.
turned out that the
no
alliance
matter what
tribe
kind of
first
super warrior
drifted to
you are,
Pandaria
drag
during a
you to the
naval
bottom
war,
of the sea
and then do
Admiral
whatever you
Taylor
want.
of the alliance.
Bastard.
In addition,
There must be a
William's
traitor
only
in the
son,
great
Andoin,
Orthodox horde,
also came,
They
which attracted the
despicably told the
attention of the
fleet's
higher-ups of both
allowing the
sides.
shameless
They
alliance to
gradually
lay an
increased
accurate
the
ambush
exploration
circle.
of Pandaria
This
and
time,
invested more
Brainless
troops.
Roar's brain
After the frontline troops
worked,
began to
and he
send
discovered
back
the truth
reports,
of the matter.
big shots such
One
as
of them.
Wajin and
But
Tyrant
what if the
entered
traitors were
battlefield?
exposed?
It was completely
Those
different
demons
in this
couldn't
life.
wait for the warlocks
Duque,
who enslaved
who was well
them to
aware
die.
of the situation
Even
in
if they died
Pandaria,
with the warlocks,
planned
without
everything
special
before
soul
taking
restraining
action.
methods,
The great
those
chief
demons
of the
could
tribe,
perfectly
Gurus,
roll back to the
was
twisting
tempted by
nether
the
and
evil
resurrect.
voice in his heart.
It was better
He
than being a
directly
doormat
abandoned
here.
his perplexity,
Brainless Roar
ignored
began
all
to
the
be paranoid,
details, and led
as
the
they
army
approached
straight
the
to the
Kalimdor
splendid
continent.
valley.
100
Along the
kilometers
way, he did
southeast
not
of
even
Durotor,
separate
the
from the
horde's
main
aerial
force
fleet was
and
ambushed
directly
again.
killed his way to
This
the
time,
destination,
the alliance
leaving
finally
only the
shut
minimum
down
number
most
of
of the
sentries
horde's
to
airships,
monitor the
and in the
movements
end,
of the alliance.
only less than
In
15,000
fact,
horde
even
warriors
these
could
so-called
safely
sentries were
return to
mixed with
Agrima.
water droplets.
Jaina asked Duque
in the name
how
of
this
monitoring
degree
the
came about.
alliance. Well,
Gurus
I
left
can't
all
let
the
Brainless
sick
Roar
and
be too
injured
strong,
soldiers behind.
but I can't let him
He
be
did not
too weak.
even leave any supplies.
If he returns to
and
Agrima
only gave them the
alive,
right to burn,
all the beastmen will
and
think
loot
of him
at will.
as a deserter.
Hence,
To
there were
maintain
even
his
the
rule,
elites
he
of
can't
small
get rid of
clans
his
in the
most
tribe
loyal
who took the
Kukuran
initiative
guards.
to leave the main
Oh,
force in
it would
order
be
to
too fake
encircle
if he
the
only
most
had the
fertile
guards
land
left.
as their
So I
clan's
was
future
merciful
territory.
and left him about
This
10
caused
ships
a
of
large
ordinary
number of people
soldiers
to fall
10
behind,
ships of
but their
mantis men
morale did
and
not
10
drop.
ships of ancient
The orcs'
demons.
thinking was that simple.
In the end,
When
Duque
they went to a
added,
new
they were
place,
shot
there would
with
be
shotguns.
prey and enemies.
Jaina rolled her eyes.
Once the enemies were
So
killed,
he's a piece
the
of
prey
trash
would
with
all
broken
belong
arms
to
and
the
legs.
orcs.
No matter what, they had to get rid of the
In the
eyesore
last
first.
years of his rule
At
over
the moment
Agrima,
of war with the
Brainless
alliance,
Roar carried
the
out
orcs
his
under
reign of
Brainless
terror
Roar
to
were
the
even
extreme.
more
If
unscrupulous.
any beastman
It
dared
was
to say
precisely
anything
because
bad
he knew
about
this
him,
that
a
Duque
thief
was
would
not
immediately
worried at all
inform
that
them,
Emperor
and
Xiao
in
Hao
less
would
than
side
3
with the
minutes,
tribe.
the
After
Kukuran
all,
guards would
the
arrive.
tribe in this
The
life was
lightest
even
punishment
more
would be a beating,
unscrupulous.
and the
Besides,
heaviest punishment
Xiao
would be
Hao,
death.
who had tied his
In
soul
this
to
life,
Pandaria,
under the stimulation
could clearly
of Duque
understand
and
the
things
guidance
that he could not have
Yashaji's
known
power
when he was immortal.
Brainless Roar
For
became
example,
even
he
more
could
violent.
vaguely see the fate.
For victory, Duque was
Every
not
horde
wrong.
must obtain
the
the
tribe
power
would
of
indeed cause
Yashaji,
trouble in
the great
Pandaria,
Orthodox
and it would be
horde,
with Yashaji.
under the protection of
The only
ancient
difference
gods
from
from
this
this
predetermined
will
fate
become the
was that the
ruler of
alliance
this
was
planet.
cleaner and
In
more
the King's
noble.
Valley,
The
Gurus,
brutality of
who
the
had pulled
tribe
out
pushed the
Yashaji's
Pandaren
heart for
further
public
towards
display,
the alliance.
made such a
If Emperor
declaration to
Xiao
all
Hao
the
didn't
horde's
even know
people.
how to choose, then he
Damn
wouldn't
it.
deserve to be called the
Ancestors
greatest
above,
emperor
I don't
of
want to
all
drink
time.
that black stuff.
In fact,
The that the Beastmen suffered enough from the demonic that the Alliance had achieved a complete victory in who said the mystery of immediately beheaded by the guards. All that was left was to follow the Huron guards arrest any opposition, through the portal, but they also gathered all the Horde's members and formed a long line. Things like drink Yashaz's will only rot the body if left unattended. Who had already lost his mind. Sometimes he had to be ruthless and let out the pus and blood people to put Yashaji's heart into a huge cage. We can still hope for it in the raging river opposite the west gate of the ground. And then he stroked his beard there were at least a million Horde refugees living along the raging river. Was referring to. On the other side, the Horde was marching in. Without the hindrance of the Alliance, Xiao Hao told the leaders of the Pandaren organizations in their dreams to evacuate the civilians. As the former chief, he hadn't abdicated for long, became so he still had a lot of information under the guidance of Yashaji's mind. Didn't prohibit these channels. Headed west from the north of the Emerald Gorge, followed him to Stormwind City. Told Thrall about it. As long as he entered Kunlai Mountain and passed through the Gate of God, the human book he would be able to reach the splendid gorge. Thrall originally absent-mindedly and read the note the warlock and let his subordinates over again and head west. Isn't this history going backwards? This was the territory of the still orcs who believed that kind of nonsense. Although after more than 30 years, people to hide and pretend that there was no danger here. No one knew who the F*** that the Dreamy Eye wanted to destroy the F*** CK mentioned that Duke had drowned 1 million orcs in a battle 30 years ago and bewitched the orcs to drink the demon's blood, which led to the Great War changed his mind. The war ended went all the way south, which also stimulated the orcs' ambition of the Emerald Forest. Thus, there were the first and second by the Pandaren Wars. They entered the Misty Boardwalk from the west, easy to forget. Turned north. It wasn't known whether the new generation of orcs didn't have the painful memories of the old generation of orcs. Brainless Roar suffered the first the traditional orcs from Nagran were any better than the shameless Duke who ordered some flying warships to cover the transport ships in the blink of an eye and laid more than 10,000 new magic dissatisfaction with everything in the world. This type of landmine was different from the traditional and triggering casual life. It had to absorb enough earth elements before it could be activated. The heavens, the earth, after absorbing enough earth elements, they thought they were the best in the world. The surface of the mine would be covered with a layer of soil. What was so scary about failure? It looked no different from an ordinary stone. They were dead. There was no trouble they caused them would have to be paid for by other flying transport ships in the world in the sky and open the big belly of the ships as if they were laying Nagrand beastmen for the first time. When a group of horde warriors walked past the pile of delayed triggered mines, do you really think that the orcs will always be the first disaster suddenly spread in the heart of the horde's vanguard commander, General Nazgûl? Do you really think that the Alliance doesn't dare to retreat? Do you really think that the group of powerful guardians will pretend that they didn't see anything? A crimson flame erupted from the ground into the guillotine. Like a small-scale volcanic eruption, angrily smashed everything around him. In the middle of the 3 rows of infantry. But there were already tears in the corners of his eyes. 2 squads of soldiers, Hukaron, who had gone through countless battles and gladiators and was recognized as the best fighter and the most loyal to great Chief Garrush, were turned to him were dumbfounded. The rest were all crippled with so many years and legs. This was the first time they saw such despair in Sal's eyes. The large group of horde warriors in the middle and at the back nervously gripped their weapons and looked around. The relations between the various tribes. There was nothing, so that all the people of the tribe could live as well as possible. Walked out from the middle of the troops and listened to the needs of the people. Reported everything to his great chief. I'm familiar with this smell. No need to ask. Battle. It's and he did not hesitate to go deep into the slums by that damn Duke lived when he carried out civil affairs. This is our enemy being afraid. He was the model of a great chief. Said rudely, many people were touched by his deeds. During the years when they were enslaved by humans, I don't care what method you use for the beastmen. I just want to see the results. It was the bright light that looked up to heaven and hell. Garrush returned to his guards. Even he had given up. This world was magical. Chieftain, for example, waved his hand violently. And the warrior profession had the magical skill, shield wall. The bloodline of the beastmen should not end human mind clearing in the history of the horde appeared. He didn't give up. Countless warriors of the horde, were incomprehensible to the attendants, were all lined up only at the Sal himself knew who he was admitting defeat to deflect the terrible damage. He was referring to something else, creating a safe path for their compatriots. The Alliance began its final propaganda. No one knew how many professional warriors had their legs blown off. But they did not choose to become injured. The Alliance High Command they used themselves as mind-clearing of the horde and rolled to the unknown road ahead. The heart of the ancient god Yashaji in Pandaria. He is now in the main city of the horde and did not speak for a long time, performing evil physical transformation on all the members of the horde. Unfortunately, following to the vision of the Alliance leader. They have a better way to solve the problem. The image of Orgrimmar's towering city walls appeared in each of the magic mirrors. They can only come up with this slightly tragic and the magnificent walls of Agrima were built with rough bricks. Chapter 1953. Countless green-skinned beastmen were lining up, IQ a small number of Taurens. In his opinion, he had at least arthropods that the Alliance people did not recognize. For example, through the labels, he could find everyone knew that they were the new members of the triggering of the landmines. The mantises. Was it pressure sensing? Everyone, after drinking a bowl of disgusting black, or elemental sesame-like liquid if that found a way, people would never drink to let the goblins install rollers to open the way. Swelled up like they were inflated. His brain was not good, and he was not emerge from every corner of their bodies, snapped his fingers, looking extremely hideous and terrifying. Soon, Sally continued to speak in an increasingly passionate nightmare had arrived. The Horde, countless as we all know, robots with two ridiculous mechanical legs and big red flashing lights on their heads, they were bewitched by the Horde with ridiculous steps, controlled by the if there was a veteran general like Varrock and launched a war against the Dreamy, he would definitely not be unfamiliar with and became extremely because it was the nightmare that he had brought to the Horde. They destroyed the capital of the peace-loving Dreamy mobile alarm system, Wrath City, nearly 30 years ago. That they were the magical craftsmanship of the gnomes had created a special robot called the Horde. Wantonly entered the territory controlled by the Alliance members for tens of thousands of years to plunder resources, upgraded version declaring war on the Alliance spirit, and used the brutal to the magic bomb. What did that mean? Rainbow, the demon spirit that would send you to the Western Paradise. After falling into a disadvantage on the battlefield, they turned to seek could not avoid the demon spirits that were charging at them from all directions when the front was clearing the mines and the middle and rear parts of the army were completely blocked. Army had destroyed as a self-destructing unit. This new type of robot army had 2 layers of armor. Alliance soldiers. There was a thick layer of baffle at the front, the wings of death, and the outermost layer in the other directions was a thin iron sheet that was easy to break. Between the 2 layers of armor, there was a large amount of small metal lumps, and our people died in the natural disasters from metallurgy by the ancient manufacturing. When a demon of the ancient gods rushed into the midst of the Horde soldiers. Speaking to this point, the Alliance Sally could no longer controlling it from afar and fiercely designated the wooden table of the broadcasting station. Through elemental control, now, the Horde, in order to rule the world of Azeroth soldiers in order to erase the humans to the Western Paradise, elves, and all the other Alliance races from this world and blood actually did not hesitate to seek the protection of the ancient god. The continuous explosions brought great and vicious to the Horde. Unfortunately, the orcs showing a devastated village with bones all over the ground. When the Darkspear trolls left the Horde, the Horde lost their best hunters of a mother and son. It was not that the orcs did not have human mother who, but they were in the last moments of her life, tightly hugged her child. Not only the front of the group, what was left of the back of her child's body was a stone thousands of Yao spirits that were flickering with dazzling red light. The first and second they were like the messengers of death from Stormwind, and also like the whips of God that drove the orcs away. To Stromgarde, Eagle Nest stimulated the nerves of the tribal warriors even more. I give the order. To incomplete statistics, more than 3 million civilians were slaughtered by the beastmen, brainless and 10 million humans lost their homes. Issue a rather rash order. Batches after batches of tribal soldiers began to form a single 1962. Charging forward, the broadcast continued. After the war, the Alliance showed the greatest mercy and did not create a cruel and bloody path of death. On the contrary, in the face of a new round of attacks from the Dark Forces Scourge Army, the then Commander-in-Chief of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, made the decision to allow the remaining orcs to cross the Kalimdor we can just shoot down all the airships in the sea around Durotor. The Alliance no sent a large number of ships and provided food to receive more than 2 million orcs from the destroyed Draenor tribal warriors to obtain the power of Yashaji. The orcs repeatedly announced that after they got rid of the so-called evil chi could strengthen the ordinary soldiers. Over a new leaf. If every tribal warrior became a humanoid tank, and fight then the Alliance would have a headache. However, how did the tribe led by the tribal soldiers the Alliance's kindness and trust seemed to understand? The scene changed again, yes, not bad, showing the beautiful, picturesque Pandaria. Duke praised her. The splendid valley, I feel like you guys are a little like with greenery and filled with the aura of nature. Instantly exploded and turned into a pitch-black land of death after Gurus threw Yashaji's heart into body shone with the golden light, even brighter than the god of light. At the end of the scene, there was a little Pandaren crying. Who doesn't know that you can use your appearance that transcended the aesthetic standards of the race? Duke was clear black and white eyes. Speaking of which, and that was a very long tragic expression. He still remembered that he pretended to be the bad guy and kissed Tyrant. All the audience who witnessed the scene her to do all kinds of shameful things. The Horde is too hateful. There was the 10,000 years of shelving after discovering that the fog that shrouded the Pandaria continent would not force an awkward conversation or anything like that. An invasion, bloodletting, and without any communication. It was fine as long as it was declared war, and the Alliance used all kinds of strange methods to harass the tribe and make the tribe for more than 10,000 years. After all, they wantonly did not know if the tribal warriors in this occupation after being strengthened by the murderous aura, they attempted to destroy all the kind intelligent races in Azeroth. The tribe was prepared to attack the door. There were those mutated with a domineering attitude, ecstatic expressions after obtaining Yashaji's power. Yashaji's murderous aura directly aroused the hatred of the alliance people towards the horde, and burst open the door. Trace of pity in their hearts had already disappeared. Under the guidance of Yashaji's remnant declared war, sent troops and goblin diggers to destroy a mountain and a lake in the splendid valley. In the depths of the excavated cave, actions they found completely made the alliance people abandon their kindness, who was imprisoned by the Titan Guardians. Sally's final announcement became logical. The area was taken over by the Kukran army. That the Orc tribe has repeatedly trampled on the goodwill under the escort of the alliance's elite people of the alliance. Visited the temples of the leaders of the alliances in Pandaria are currently in a close discussion and have proposed a motion to exterminate the Orcs. He also passed the trials of the celestial lords and received their blessings. In the end, little Anduin used the blessings shouting to kill all the orcs to create a legendary cloak for his father. Everyone knew that Duque liked to fish. The clueless everyone knew that Duque caught up to them to do this. He brought a large number of Pandaren guards to guard the original palace of the ancient fiendish mountain. Demon blood and joined the burning legion. Was destined to be unable to stop Garush Hellroar's ambition. The second time, because the seventh evil had appeared, refuge with the ancient gods. Evil was called the proud evil. How could he explain this? And it was the last sin that by the Pandaren Emperor Xiaohao. Why didn't the alliance just die under its the whole world to the beastmen as their hunting grounds to cover the land, stirring up for trouble again and again? Were they treating everyone as waiting for an opportunity? Even if they were silent, when Garush awakened the raging flame of anger burning in the hearts of the leaders, allowed the dark energies that had been invaded by the horde would not have a good impression of the horde. Had already been beaten. Unfortunately, every major race in the alliance had been invaded and slaughtered by the horde that carried the heart of the ancient god, pygmies, the heart of Yashaji, night elves, was transported to the lake in front of the palace of the ancient fiendish mountain under the escort of the Kukran guards. William said calmly and initiated strength had been greatly increased, felt that he was in a better state than ever. It passed unanimously. That boundless power, all mutated members of the horde, sense of excitement that seemed to be able to blow up a mountain with a single punch, are to be killed, stimulated his nerves all the time. The Alliance Conference had never given such a strict military order, but every soldier of the alliance felt that such an order raised his brown-red head after Duque started a war of public opinion and obtained the influence. Throw it into the lake. Everything became reasonable. Back in the secret room, 1954, caught up with the lake in front of the ancient fiend mountain palace was not ordinary water. Are we cruel? The ancient inhabitants of Pandaria realized the importance of the energy pool. His head and cast his gaze on the magic net, so they built an underground water system away that was monitored by the mages, the living beings. It was a desolate and slightly heroic scenery. Heart was thrown in. As a leader, Yashaji would not be able to resurrect with such a small amount of vitality. It would still be a very important step on the road of resurrection. It cannot accommodate two huge interracial organizations, and it cannot tolerate a race that is capricious and often betrays originally, in a large-scale battle, there was no place for the Pandaren to move around in a situation where the minions were facing each other. However, in the uneven terrain of the splendid valley, coupled with the fact that the tribe did not pay much attention to the perfection of formation mentality that caused her to become soft-hearted. More tribal warriors rushed over, but the green figures did not drown the black and white figures' limit. In the chaotic battle, the stronger Pandaren still had the upper hand destroy the horde facing the heavily armed orc warriors who had begun to be infected by the murderous aura to continue to ferment. When the Pandaren were still under the rule of the ancient fiends, the power of the heart of Azeroth was Pandaria's bleak future. After turning millions of orcs into right to use weapons by the rulers at that time, the Pandaren focused on practicing using chi to fight with bare hands. When the time was right, even though it was thrown into the river of wrath, Pandaren had a large amount of water to shatter the shackles of the heart of Azeroth. Monks were good at fighting with bare hands. Just like fighting the enemy, they did not only rely on the power of their weapons. The heart of Azeroth could be reactivated. For their powerful punches, even the heart of an ancient god needed a source of energy restricted by their moves. Hence, many monks were more inclined to use to come up with an action plan called drunken gazes to turn the enemy's attacks invisible, into the sunwell. While their comrades attacked when the enemy was confused, a rebellion suddenly broke out in the horde. Summoning the divine power of the mist to regulate the energy in their comrades' bodies. Sal, promoting blood circulation,
controls,
removing
Bane's
blood
stasis,
stasis, and treating injuries.
And lore,
it was the Pandaren
professionals
professionals led by the monks
launched a
who
complete
fought on the
uprising.
front line.
Because the power of these hordes' main warring races was ferocious attacks of the overthrowing Garusha's rule
by the murderous
William,
Aura,
who had formed
However,
a temporary
when Gurus
alliance
led
with
the
the horde's
Kukran
rebel
guards
army,
to the front line,
could not do
the
anything
situation
to the new
suddenly
horde.
became
After
extremely
saying a few
bad for the
harsh
Pandaren.
words, he left
In the
with the
eyes of many
alliance's
Chinese
soldiers.
players,
including
this caused
Duque,
the horde's power
the
to fall
Kukran
for the
guards were
first time,
similar to the
allowing
German
Wajin
SS
to come
back
to
then.
power as the
They
new
were
chief.
responsible for
In
protecting
this
the
life,
leader's life,
the situation
and were also
was
the
very
elite
different.
field army
The
on the tribe's
Forsaken,
side.
Trolls,
They were
and
a powerful
were
force
completely
loyal to the
separated
great
from
chieftain,
the horde,
and
no
there
matter
were no
who
blood
ascended
elves
to the position
joining the
of
horde.
great chieftain.
No other
They were
races
the warriors who
interested in participating in the vanguard who eradicated the enemy. The uprising was directly classified
They were
as a
always the
rebellion.
first to charge into
Thrall
the enemy
managed to
lines
convince his
and the
old
last
friend,
to leave.
Varrock
They were the
Salifar
elites
and his
of the
Blackrock
elites.
clan. The elites of the elites that no other troop in the horde could hope to match. In the original history, from the establishment of
The
a Grima,
Beastman's superiority
destroying
over the
Illidan's
humans in
mountain
mountain
warfare
warfare
had been proven
Valley,
through the
going
two
to
battles
Northrend
at the Dark
to end
Portal.
the threat of the Lich
In the
King,
tribe's
or
imagination,
eliminating
the real
Vermithus
enemy
and
would
his
only
rebels
come
under
from
the
the
south.
Undercity. That was
Kukran
why the
had
main
made
gate
great
of contributions to the
which
horde
faced
in
the southern
every battle
plains,
he
was the
participated
most
in.
majestic
As
and
the
sturdy.
Kukran guards, who
Whether
were
it was
absolutely
Sal or
loyal to the
brainless
chief,
Roar,
no
they were
one
the
knew the
sharpest
original
blades
history
of the tribe.
Under normal
Almost in an
circumstances,
instant,
at
as
least
Hara would have been
300
taken over
Pandaren
by the
monks who were
goblins
fighting on the front
Rustwater
line were
consortium.
cut down to the
The
ground.
horde would open up a narrow
Correspondingly,
and dangerous
nearly
path
200
from
members of the
Orgrimmar to
Kukran
Ashara,
guards would rest
merging the two
eternally
areas
in
together
Splendid
and
Valley.
making it even
But
more
right
difficult
after that,
to attack.
even more guards
No matter
rushed
which
over
direction
with
they
deafening
attacked
roars.
from, they
Taking
would
the place
receive
of their
support
comrades
from other places.
The Pandaren,
However,
who had lived in
the
peace
horde
for
would
too
never
long
know
and
how
had
many
never
years
seen
and
such
how
a
many
ferocious
things
enemy,
Duque had
were
prepared
thrown
in order
into
to conquer
disarray.
Grima.
They had more
After
skill
defeating
in
the
the Burning
combat
Legion
skills,
led by
but they were
Archimond in the
forced
Battle
into a
of Mount
panic by
Hyjal,
the opponent's
alliance
method
had
of occupying
occupied
injuries
Ashara
and
first.
lives for lives.
Even if as
The
Hara
powerful
and
inner
Grima
strength
were
of the monks
separated
could
by
ignore
tens
the
of
thick
kilometers
armor
of
the
towering
Kukran
mountains,
guards
and
it didn't
directly
matter.
hit their
The
internal
key
organs.
was that the source of the
Often,
river of
when the
wrath was
Pandaren
in Ashara.
killed the Kukran
Technically,
guards,
they
the
would
source
also
was at
be
the
dragged
junction
into
of
the
Mount
yellow
Hyjal
strings by the
the
land of
opponent's
fire
dying blow.
and Ashara.
When
It didn't matter
most
because
elite
all
group
three
of monks
areas were
suffered
under
heavy
the control
losses,
of the alliance.
The Pandaren began
The
to
amount
crumble.
of water in the
At this
river
moment,
of wrath
a
was shocking.
huge pontoon
Just
bridge made of
blocking it would
goblins
only turn
suddenly
it into a
slammed
dammed
down
lake,
from the shore and
causing
directly
Ashara
connected
to
to the
flood.
ancient Devil
If it
Mountains
didn't flood
palace.
this place,
Great
it would
chieftain
destroy
Gris
some
carried the
alliance
famous
territory.
blood howl and
Duque
strode
had
onto
used
the pontoon
bulldozers
bridge.
and other engineering
Suddenly,
teams
a
early
gust
in the
of
morning
wind
to
rolled
open
up
up
from the
two
other end of the
artificial
pontoon
rivers in
bridge.
Ashara.
The wind
One was
quickly
obvious.
gathered into a ball,
It would directly
revealing
lead
the figure
into
of the
Grey
Shadow
Valley
Sect's
and
leader,
increase the amount of
Jutulan.
water in the
Enough.
forest.
As long as it was
shouted.
used properly,
He
the
stretched his left
conservative
hand
Grey
forward
Valley
and made
could
a
recover
sword gesture,
faster, while his
the
right
other one
hand
was
kept
dark,
his unique
50
two-handed
meters
hammer
wide,
behind his
and
back.
the deepest one
Half
was
of the
15
Pandaren's
meters
face
deep.
was covered by
After
a
this
bamboo hat,
artificial river
but there
was
was a
built,
pair of
it
black
had
and
never
white
been
eyes
used.
full of anger.
It was announced
You have
that it would be a
gradually
maintenance
drifted
plant
further
for the
and
flying
further
fleet,
down the
but
path
after
of
the
evil,
plan changed,
hell
it
screamed.
was shelved.
But they
Stands
even
here.
built a series of huge factories
let
on the
out
river.
a burst of wild
Apart from the
laughter.
dam that had been
He
secretly
waved his
built
left
at the
hand
mouth
and
of the
bared
river,
his teeth.
the cement walls and the dry riverbed
Pandaren.
looked no different
This is
from
an
an unfinished
unstoppable
construction
force.
site.
With Duque's order,
snorted coldly.
the dam opened,
Your
and the
father
water
had
level
also
of the
dabbled
entire
in the
river of
so-called
wrath dropped.
unstoppable force.
At the same time,
the
the
dam
dam
built on the river
what
of
decision
wrath
did he
began
make
to
in the
slowly
end?
close.
When
This
Jutulan
way,
said this,
not a single
Duque,
drop of
who was
water would
watching the
flow
screen,
back into the
suddenly
original
felt that
river
the
of
sky
wrath.
was falling.
To prevent
It
the
was
dam
all
from
his fault
exploding,
for
there
stirring
were
up
3
trouble.
such dams
If this was
along
the
the
original
river of
history,
wrath.
of course,
Every dam was
Lord
equipped
Hull
with
would
at
have
least
fought manner off to
10,000
the
special
death.
forces that were mixed with
It could be
different
said
types
that
of
he had
troops.
been enlightened
Without
after
food,
seeking benevolence.
people could survive
The
for
problem
7
was that
days
in
just
this
by
life,
drinking water.
Lord Hull had
If
become
people
a
didn't have
great
water,
hero of
they
the
would
tribe.
die in 3 days.
He had participated in many battles against evil and had
The broken
even
flow
fought
of the
sea
river
Thun
of
before
wrath
retreating.
directly interrupted
In the
Gur's
end, when he
counterattack
died,
plan.
he still
As
followed
long as it
Duque.
was a living
In
creature,
the eyes
it
of
had
the
to
Alliance,
eat, drink,
this was
and
glory.
poop.
Of
Even
course,
after drinking
in the eyes
Yashaji's
of
brainless
Cartwater. This was a disgrace.
Beastmen still
His
couldn't
father
lack
had
water.
given up the powerful
entire
power
terrain
of the
of
Devil's
Duroder
Blood.
was a
It was a
relatively
good thing
flat
to wash
plain.
his name clean,
The broken
but
flow
the bad
of the
thing
river
was that
of
he
Wrath
kept his
also
promise
led
and
to
went to
another
serve a human
consequence of
demigod
seawater
after his
flowing
death.
back.
Well,
The turbulent
in
seawater poured
Jutalon's
back into the riverbed of the river of Wrath.
Roar,
The riverbed
roar,
that seemed to be low
Brainless
had
Howl
water
was
again,
completely
but in
enraged.
fact, The salty seawater was even more destructive to the freshwater ecosystem. He charged on the pontoon bridge and swept toward Jutalon like a gust of wind. After receiving intelligence that the entire barren lands was being attacked by the Alliance's aura as it drew from the mournful arc in the air and north, every time Gurur had prepared an army of hundreds of thousands as if he wanted to split the abominable Pandaren in front of him in half, ready to counterattack. If it had been an ordinary expert who had stepped into the realm of heroes, he would probably have been defeated within the army north along the riverbed and go directly to the Kagathia fortress built in the easternmost part of Grey Valley during the conflict with the elves. But it was so close that it was because the conflict with the Alliance broke out very late. The current Kagathia was not an opportunity in history. When the axe slammed into the wooden planks of the pontoon bridge, when the tribe had just stationed the vanguard of 50,000 people in, the entire fortress was immediately attacked by the Alliance's fortress, Turundis, from the northeast. The so-called Talon took out his two-handed hammer, which looked like a mace and a fork at breaking the water. He knew that the hammer affected the appearance of the city. Not only did he upgrade the Turundis to a fortress long ago, it was completely black, but he also set the shooting element long and one short like a fork. He didn't lack anything, there were cone-shaped spikes on all sides of the hammer's head. Whoever was hit by it would be left with a bloody hole. Unfortunately, Garush grabbed the stick at the bottom of the hammer with one hand. The highest level they were about from the Alliance commander of pure strength, send them to the sky. Jutalon was certainly not going to fight like a fool. He suddenly retracted his body and let go of the handle of the hammer by the explosion. It would probably fly at least 50 meters into the sky within half a second in the form of spare parts. True chi explosion. Then, it would scatter unevenly within a radius of 200 meters. Slap brain-dead the only reason the Alliance and teach him how to turn an ugly fortress into a chrysanthemum as a bait. He had underestimated the toughness of brain-dead dry red soil. The tribal chief did not dodge and punch Jutalon's there wouldn't be much energy vortex unless it was a deep well that had been dug beforehand. There was a sound similar to a violent explosion where water and food were lacking. The law of action to clear the way Garush was unscathed. The only people he could think of were brain-dead Talon who was almost sent flying, and the Warsong tribe. Jutalon's broad was only thick panda paws. There were indeed some Warsong tribe 20 meters before he finally stopped. Most of them were soldiers from other smaller tribes. Although he looked good when he slid backward, this was because the gap in strength of the Warsong tribe had stayed behind to guard Agrima. Brain-dead Roar shouted and suddenly launched the Hellscream clan's ancestral leap. Even though there was a raging river at the entrance, that as long as they were not stupid, they would not take the attack wells in the city. Only the members of the Hellscream clan that there was water in Agrima, the horror a large number of refugees who had been dismissed and sent to the basin of the raging river swarmed back to Agrima was contained in this their nest. If it was a slightly weaker opponent, they would have died on the spot after being shocked by this deafening roar. It felt more like they were treating the symptoms and not the root of the problem. This was not only a declaration of solve the water problem, but a large number of mutated orcs would still die. In a sense, this was an extremely powerful spiritual shock that was far above the shadow people like William, who had once lost the capital, even comparable to Yaxaron's for their home spiritual erosion. On the other hand, it was under the suppression of his will that considered himself to be a person of Stormwind, didn't have such a deep understanding of death in the air. Forget it, there's no mournful red light on his blood roar straight to the second stage. The lake beneath his feet on the night when the refugee wave broke out in Agrima. There was originally a horde army of 30,000, but he had overestimated his of the darkness and underestimated the Alliance wouldn't be able to see them after being controlled by the dry riverbed of the raging river all the way to the mental confusion. Unfortunately, the Alliance's battleships launched an air raid and threw incendiary bombs who was in charge of suppressing nothing more suitable than a canyon to set fire to. What kind of humiliation was that? He threw an incendiary bomb in the face and tail of the orcs. Some people were unable to recover from the setback. Then he threw diesel incendiary bombs along the riverbed. Some people became braver and stronger as they suffered setbacks. After confirming that there were no horde reinforcements to the latter group, the Alliance sent Naxxramas and be in a daze flying warships, but it was only when Blood fortress in the middle that he revealed his prowess as a martial arts master of the Shadow Trace sect. This sturdy fortress was guarded by the traitor Jujar during the Cataclysm, at just the right time and easily diverted the impact of the tribe's rule over the Barren Lands. It was as if Garush, no matter how sturdy a fortress was, it was still as if he had thrown the Bloodhowl out himself. After the Alliance's weapons entered the modern era, was that he felt the fortresses built on the ground were proven to be unable to withstand the bombardment of modern bombs. It was rejecting the killing intent in his body.
body. Modern 1,000mm cannons could no longer satisfy their delusions. Thrown away blood roar. Following the development of the 2,000-pound super bomb, good enough for a large bomb with a charge of 5 tons was quickly developed that could be thrown by modified flying transport ships and anger drove him on. Soon, on the other side, could no longer satisfy the appetite of this group of crazy scientists. But as soon as he turned around, he saw a fist the size of a water tank rapidly enlarging in his field of vision. Then could they use a super bomb with the largest gunpowder load without any fancy tricks? If even the largest battleship could not carry the bomb, then what would be used to drop the bomb? At that moment, the group of dwarves said in unison, as if he had been hit by the ram of a human warship. To drop the bomb? Jutalon was sent flying taking advantage of the fact that Duque was struggling in other time behind him. The damned just as he was about to fall into the pool, his black eyes suddenly turned, and clarity returned to them. 100 tons with a magnificent movement of the white crane's wings. In order not to cause a big explosion when the charge was loaded, the surface of the pool with his even had to painstakingly divide the explosive into 100 small compartments and detonate them separately. He flew into the air and used the rising dragon fist to perform power of this super bomb was surgery on Garush's trapezoidal chin. Scary. Brainless roar was sent directly and crashed onto the pontoon. In the most important flying fortress stood on one of the guardrails of the pontoon and shouted, in a rage, I've dealt with William the Minotaurs and the Troll bomb compartment. No wonder they left their tribes and deck of Naxxramas. You really don't deserve to be their great chief. At least it would not be able to penetrate the outer armor 30 meters into the air. It was not difficult with the momentum of a falling comet, but if such a large bomb was hit, it would still explode. Kick. Thus, if the kick landed, the dwarves put in a lot of effort to add protective armor like a rotten watermelon, as a result, ketchup all over the ground, which was originally a little like a square box, who was munching on melon seeds and Naxxramas at the bottom, was speechless. It looked like Naxxramas had become a cylinder of ice cream. What's the point of talking so much? The cylinder had been thrown down, but just the ice cream was still in the air. A hilarious scene unfolded. It was probably a delayed detonation fuse. Jutalon had relying on the acceleration of gravity and to resist attacks after being strengthened by the murderous aura, smashed directly above the Twilight Fortress that did not explode immediately. And a forward roll. However, under the huge impact, so much force that he broke through at least the pontoon and got his foot stuck. When it reached the middle and lower parts of the fortress, there was an explosion. Gurus leaped to the side of his blood patterns appeared densely on the black stone walls of the fortress that was filled with an ominous pontoon bridge with the other. From behind, he used the chain to strangle dragons began to erupt like a cowboy would do with a rope fortress. They don't deserve to join my flames leaped out of the fortress. With a sudden flames once again gathered into a huge cloud of fire, was pulled over like a destructive flame shockwave that spread in all directions. He finally confirmed the entire hull was indeed resisting him. The huge fortress the abominable suffered a terrible earthquake, but the direction of Bloodhull's axe changed, which was more than 2 meters thick. The blunt side was as fragile as Jutalon's abdomen. In less than 2 seconds, a small part of the axe blade collapsed layer by layer like the Pandren's belly saved him. The wound was the continuous roars, but it was a flesh wound, completely not a fatal like a landslide. Blarg. The sea of fire was pushed further away, on the spot, and the whole area was under the flames. Duque, making creaking sounds, could not bear to watch. In order to block the offensive of the Alliance, was actually quite good at fighting, but he had arranged an army of more than every time he appeared, he would vomit the Twilight Fortress. As a result, relying on the Twilight Fortress, they had built large and small blockhouses and positions. He managed to escape despite the lack of air force. Brainless Roar firmly believed that the Alliance's infantry would bleed to the last drop of blood in front of this blood and cursed, because when he led the army to attack here, everyone will know what my paid a heavy price. They will find you and kill you. Roar angry was that the Alliance displayed his arrogance by the ferocious expression. After clearing out the weak air force of the Horde, they directly waiting for those arrogant enemies like Duke Marcus and lay an egg. In my fortress, they directly blew up my own masterpiece with a big bomb. They will witness my endless power and fall at my shattered brainless Roar's fantasy. Anyone who dares to oppose my tribe will be impaled on the spire of Orgrimmar. You Pandaren are trying to bury your hatred and anger nearby. But even if they were hiding in bunkers or bunkers, now as long as they did not completely isolate themselves from the flames, his maniacal laughter, they would immediately be burnt to a crisp by the all-pervasive waves of fire with his axe. Those who were further away were also which was big enough to contain an ogre. Naxxramas left after making a simple assessment of the damage was revealed. It headed northeast to meet up with the Dalajan and put on another show. Even after 25,000 years, cleaning up even the battlefield, there was no need to the heart. The traditional method of excavation, which contained time-consuming evil power was still beating without stopping. Other than the Alliance infantry, there was a vassal race that saw that in the battlefield very cleanly, colorful, and that was the Karaji in all directions. Be it the descendants trying to get away from Yashaji's heart, or the bugmen who were adept at digging holes, they were the best choice to deal with the enemy's underground. Coming from the heart before it was annihilated in the black flames. The orcs of the Twilight Fortress had not yet mutated. Then he raised his head again and started a massacre, especially by letting ordinary human soldiers do it. There would always be some Virgin Mary type guys who jumped out. Garush was this happy. The insect magic was good, he laughed wildly, and if anything happened, mocking his opponent who had lost the ability to fight. If they were really pushed, he had vented his anger. That they were not strict enough. His face became ferocious and cruel again. Who cut his belly to apologize. He opened his bloody mouth to the widest, revealing a mouthful in the Karaji insect people empire was the twin emperors. Accompanied by his arrogant declaration, and it didn't matter how many bugs died below. In the pool of life in front of the refugees in the entire barren lands. That was where the essence of the entire pool of life was gathered. The rest were nothing more than cannon fodder that brain devil tried to use so thick that it would take at least 30 people to wrap their arms around it, and small fortresses into the sky. All over the beam of light emitting this would not be the goal of Naxxramas and the other main forces. From 100 kilometers away, which already had detailed intelligence. There was no longer any clarity in his pupils, according to the size of each target, covered his eyes, and arranged for mobile forces to support everyone who was still fighting in Splendid Valley felt that the laws of Splendid Valley were deviating. After another was blown into the sky. Kindness, if it weren't for the splattered flesh and broken him in fear, in the eyes of the Alliance soldiers, the ancient god Yashaji, which only existed in legends, it had to be known that in training, in order to simulate the environment of artillery bombardment in a Splendid Valley's water of life, deliberately let the captains of each training ship drive the entire valley as if they were drunk, shaking, the greenery in Splendid Valley disappeared after being covered by Yashaji's black of the shells hit turning into a lifeless 100 meters of the target area. Streams of black water shot up into the sky. The terror with of the ancient gods had used this method to announce that they had taken control of everything learned through a lot of live fire training. As proof of my power over the barren lands, will be my first the wind sacrifice. Was often only level 1 or 2. Raised his blood roar high in the air. Good vision, just as the Garrush was about to finish off the attack with his axe. A slender, this was agile, a typical example of combat being suddenly easier than behind him. The Alliance destroyed the Horde's strongholds from epic-grade daggers stabbed straight into his back. Clearly feel Duquesne's invisible big hands, had been strengthened which by the evil gripping their necks. Not only had his body been greatly strengthened and give a fatal blow, but so had his reactions. The Alliance's strangulation he twisted his body leaving anyone alive intensified the panic of the Horde. The judgment over a million Horde citizens and soldiers gathered at the gates of Orgrimmar, shouting to enter. Before the brainless roar could finish, the great city of Orgrimmar, another lie which had never fallen before, was their only safe harbor. It was a smoke grenade. Garush made the other party did not attack. Close the gates. Instead, they used the smoke whether Alliance or Horde. When brainless roar used they entered the range of arrows and he discovered that a man and a woman with similar equipment had already activated sprint and were carrying Ju-Talan away. The chieftain crushed the head of the opposition with a single hand on the spot. His body was filled with arrogant face, had the most terrifying viciousness in his heart. A scumbag like Ju-Talan doesn't no longer worth chasing after. For billions of years, just like that, the Beastmen have lived like this and his daughter to rescue Ju-Talan. What happened next was to follow the original development of history. Those incompetent clans will be thrown into the wilderness to die. Years of defecting if they want to blame someone, the entire Alliance throne conference burst into laughter. They didn't inherit a strong bloodline. This was no different from a man who wanted to be a eunuch but castrated himself only to find out that the last emperor of the Celestial Empire was elimination. Alright, if they couldn't win a group farce, they couldn't get the best hunting grounds. The Alliance army a good hunting ground entered Pandaria's they wouldn't have enough prey to survive the Pandaria continent. If they couldn't survive, primitive, they would either destroy the other clans and resources at sunset, or die tragically under the men who were resisting the Mantis men at the Great Traditional Beastmen. Many Panda men lived a rather peaceful life before the arrival of the fittest. After all, no traditional the Mantis men found the Garush's words wrong. The Panda men had no mortal enemies on this continent. But on this day, every Panda man looked at the sky with a slightly blank expression. But now, the Horde was no longer the world of the traditional endless number of airships. If it was in a closed environment like Draenor, those that were over 100 meters long and relatively slender were destroyers. After the Great Migration, from the increasingly scarce resources of larger to the wider Kalandor, the largest traditional at least 250 meters long to change under the guidance of the former chief. These battleships all had huge propellers on both sides. But these propellers only felt that it was natural for them to be protected by the Horde. Them that provided when they thought that the levitating force, and invincible, but the magic net, wisest and greatest chief, Garush, in addition to the dense hedgehog-like anti-aircraft artillery clusters installed under the airships, there were also a large number of magic patterns, hatred, and these magic other emotions intertwined among the refugees that were connected to the magic net, and that these emotions would for them to strengthen the combat power of the orcs who had drunk the Yashaji Blackheart water, as well as a large number of griffins, fear, hippogriffs, and other birds. Doubt looked like confusion, cover the sky, and pride. If it weren't for Emperor evils of the Yashaji Blackheart water were born from the negative emotions and negative men had joined the alliance. This mutated orcs became more burly. In the traditional territory of the Panda men, every corner of their bodies was still very quiet. Stunned the top leaders of the alliance, sailed past and even made Tyrion headed straight for the Horde army in the Splendid Valley, speechless. However, on the high altitude outlying islands in the western part of Pandaria that were far from the mainland and only connected by bridges, said calmly, Mantis Plateau. Does anyone else have any objections to my ground with an eye for an eye? The leaders of the Throne Conference 1957. This was not because they were silently resisting, the shrill and but because the explosion next scene made them Mantis man was directly blasted. It was just that they didn't want to destroy the harmonious atmosphere. His entire body was green, so no hot head jumped out and said things like, as he was blasted, if there's no objection, his entire body disintegrated into countless pieces of different sizes under the terrifying power of the TNT gunpowder. If there are no objections, then it will be regarded as a unanimous vote by the throne who opened fire let out a strange cry of joy. For no alliance member cared about the Mantis man's in the name of the chief commander of the alliance. Even thought that these monsters deserved to die. Of the operation to destroy Orgrimmar. Operation Code was lying on her exclusive bed of gold coins. It didn't matter if no one could understand her or many dragons was provided by the alliance. Gold coins. The cruelty of the weapon was not the fault of the weapon itself, but the fault of the person who pressed the firing button and made the decision to use the destructive weapon. In fact, it was Garrush who had tried to destroy the alliance. Many people in Duke's entire tribe who had elected Garrush to become the great chief was quite dissatisfied with Duke's emotions were extremely complicated as he watched the innocent orc chose to remain silent under the influence of objecting did not using the people's negative emotions to catalyze the mutation. Tyrant, it was too late, and the other girls were also looking at Duke innocent. Duke pursed his lips. That's right. I also think that letting Garush go to because they wanted to become more relaxed and follow a powerful leader without thinking and that they could simply as an excuse to destroy the Horde seems a bit redundant. Live a better life that they wanted. The Horde declaring war on the alliance is enough to destroy the Horde. By believing in the brainless roar, not only did he not gain more, but he also lost himself. Who had a bad impression of the Horde. Everyone could see that this level of mutation was not something that could be changed back after 8 to 10 years in the prison against the Horde invading Azeroth. This was a completely different kind of evil creature but over the years, the Alliance has become a coalition to destroy Twilight Fortress centered on Azeroth to fight against the Burning realized that it was impossible for him to hold on just by relying on well as the evil elemental lords. He finally unleashed another emphasized, Mantis Man. Since we call ourselves righteous times, we have no reason to kill races that were intelligent race that has nothing to do with evil and refused to repent. Everyone finally understood that the Horde was an organization, or the Mantis and the Beastmen were a surveillance image brought by the magic network's connection to the mage's raised her slender hand. It was as if a horror movie was playing. Is it just to let Garush spread the power of Yashaji? With a strange sound, a Mantis Man was transforming. Garush is the 3-meter-tall Mantis Man, not only swelled like a balloon, or anyone in the alliance, but his pair of scythe-like forelimbs were the one who single-handedly put Garush on the throne of the great chieftain biological blades had a frightening and the ones who agreed with him, it seemed that this guy was stimulated by the power of Yasha and was strengthening the majority of the orcs who were traditional orcs. A simple change in size wouldn't bring any threat to the armrests of his chair. As for the qualitative change, is the culprit that was another matter destruction of the Horde and the imminent extinction of the Beastmen. What the hell is this? Then every Beastman or his supporters burst out cursing. They're the ones who mechanically enlarged Draenor's man began to grow wings. Survival and the rather transparent green wings had the structure of a cicada's wings. When Duke said this, not only the wings, but the entire Mantis Man's back was transforming and evolving, every producing single human muscle tissue unique to flying insects. When they couldn't win, they would be captured. They didn't have the awareness of a loser at all. From the initial fan-like flapping, they actually had the nerve to preach in the new hummingbird-like wings. Beastmen will never be slaves and made themselves into victims. However, do they really think we've all lost our memories? Into the air and darted into the sky. Was the most radical. We're in big trouble. She raised her hand. William was the first to frown. Blade made of pure air elements faster than all the air forces we have object, and Kudrin Wildhammer concluded. She nimbly played with this dagger-like thing. The commander of the Alliance's air force, the elf will never forget the crime of burning down the Eversong can keep up with these flying mantises' movements. If the Horde did not use the power of Yashaji as if they were having a toothache with the Alliance with their current strength, Air Force, what would the Alliance do after the Dragon Army can deal with them? Sighed and shook his head. At this moment, that's an untenable assumption. Jaina, Kill, a long time ago, in the future I saw, they still chose this path. But if that's the case, finally, probably the two Pharaoh of the Alliance saw it. I will exile all the former members of the Horde to Draenor. Confirmed Duquesne's judgment. What else was there on Draenor? That's the shadow elemental energy line, day by day, with fewer and fewer resources. Jaina followed. Now, except for the necessary sentry towers, the Alliance and the Horde had almost withdrawn all their manpower from the Draenor and end everything. Duque made the decision, still asking them to wait for death. Everyone was amazed by the awesomeness of the ancient gods. Jaina was agitated. They were the true masters of biochemistry. Doesn't belong to them they could always use their evil powers to create a bunch of messy biochemical combat weapons. The Burning Legion gave us too much pressure. Those things might affect the appearance of the city, those traditional beastmen from Draenor to Azeroth for the sake of fighting this evil together and for the sake of humanitarianism. When the Alliance's air fleet encountered this batch of enemies that could fly up to 80 kilometers per hour and had abnormally high mobility, as soon as they gained a foothold, they couldn't wait to provide us with endless territory for three-dimensional formation we refused, and they directly declared the attacks of the flying mantises. How can we keep such ingrates? The effect was not very good. Kalia was speechless for a moment. Of flying mantises this was a clash of ideals. The dense formation as the native inhabitants of Azeroth and killed their way into the gaps certainly had no ships. Obligation to welcome outsiders to share the training for the enemy's invasion. The Alliance's air waved his hand and encountered various problems. He continued in one breath. They did not dare to shoot at the enemies between the anti-aircraft cannons and friendly warships. Whether it was for the sake of racial reproduction or to make the tribe stronger, they actually forgot to switch weapons and foolishly tried to turn the anti-aircraft the ancient gods whose resulting in them being killed on the turrets. This is the reality. Flying mantises could even use their sharp sickle forelimbs to cut through the protective armor of the destroyer while flying at high speed. Then we could still negotiate. At the critical moment, we could even give up our technology to increase the capacity of the land for the population. Summoned the wind elemental army into the idea, and I can do it. I'm sure everyone has seen the hybrid rice that I had my subordinates develop. Chapter 1967. If it had been the previous two critical times, and less such as during the wrath of the Lich King period, the barbaric perhaps and violent the mantis would have been useful. With his weak intelligence and reckless personality, directly chose the anti-air cannons might have been broken through. He knew that it was the temptation of the ancient god outermost circle, but he still chose to accept would never allow his army to lack layers. Does everyone know what the ancient gods did back then? All the troops together and trap all of them, Pantheon Titan, this commander could be shot. Of Azeroth not only the outermost circle was affected, the earth would have collapsed, but also the newbie and even the entire planet would have been drained dry and fallen into destruction. The Lich King. This is the reason why the Alliance will not tolerate the existence of the ancient gods and the Burning Legion. Less than 10 years. The women in the harem of the veterans who had experienced the last two wars were now lieutenants. Perhaps the Alliance did indeed suppress the survival space of the tribe, the Alliance but the two organizations with different ideals and different deliberately letting the Alliance military train their troops. Since the tribe chose the most terrifying path of destruction, then they shouldn't fight against the overwhelming air force of the Burning Legion. Since they were going to lose anyway, they might as well cut their throats and die a clean death. The Wind Elemental Army entered the battlefield, but they didn't participate in the battle. Thousands of huge wind elementals hovered in the air and stared at the front with their dark and unclear eyes. This was the way the military bigwigs expressed their dissatisfaction. Can you little bastards do it? If you can't, then let's go. The veterans who were middle and lower-ranking officers in front of them immediately lost their composure and started cursing loudly. Noob! They're already in front of you. What are you waiting for? Change your weapons. Are the rocket launchers in the turrets just decorations? Idiot. Can't you cover your teammates and shoot their butts with the anti-air cannons if you can't hit them? Trash. All of you are trash. This is your last chance. If you can't form an AA anti-air firepower net, Then get the F*CK back to the reserves and your official establishment will be revoked. After Duke became the commander-in-chief of the Alliance, he spent 15 years to make the entire Alliance flourish. Not only did he adjust the Alliance to be able to switch between the two economic forms at any time, but he also greatly improved the status of the Alliance soldiers. Those who had served in the army, as long as they retired normally, not only would they be able to take care of the old, the weak, the sick and the disabled, but they would also receive all kinds of enviable benefits. After retiring from the military, there would be all kinds of free skills training. After completing their studies, they would be assigned a job. As long as they didn't slack off on purpose, they would be guaranteed a salary that was 30% higher than the average salary in society. Apart from that, there were other benefits that could be accumulated. Different bonuses were distributed according to the rank of the officers and the battles they had participated in. For example, those who fought against no cent would receive no cent mining dividends, which could be distributed until the soldier died. During the Cataclysm, those who fought in the Dragon Slumber Temple received the Twilight Dragon Leather Company limited share dividends. Once you get married, you can enjoy tax deductions. In principle, as long as the child was healthy, it wouldn't cost much for the child to grow up to 18 years old. The Alliance's allowance covered most of the expenses. The worst part was that the Alliance encouraged soldiers to marry 2 wives. Du, who had a guilty conscience, signed a special decree. Active and retired soldiers who married 2 wives and had 4 or more children would receive special subsidies. It was a monthly subsidy that was enough to make ordinary people envious. Children can be raised until they reach the age of 16, when they gradually reduce to a reasonable level. At the same time, the Alliance definitely didn't raise lazy people. If a retired soldier had the ability to work and was under the age of 60, he didn't want to work and had money to spend. Sorry, all the subsidies would not be issued. It was this multi-layered blessing of glory, responsibility, and welfare that forged the lofty status of the Alliance soldiers today. As soon as he said that they should go back to the reserves, the recruits were suddenly shocked. Then, as if they were on steroids, they began to perform exceptionally well. Bang! 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 The 2 barrels of the twin 113mm anti-aircraft cannon roared. This large-caliber anti-aircraft cannon had the longest range, the highest muzzle velocity, and the strongest destructive power among today's anti-aircraft cannons. As long as it was hit, the 5-meter-tall mantis would be like a kite struck by a machete. It would be directly torn apart in midair, turning into smelly limbs and flesh. To-do-do-do-do. The new improved version of the twin 40mm Bofors SCG anti-aircraft cannon had a super high firing rate of 0.8 seconds per round. It was the pinnacle of today's Azeroth military industry. This kind of anti-aircraft cannon with a shorter range was responsible for creating a terrible metal storm in the air within a 2-kilometer range, turning all the approaching flying mantises into pieces. The more the anti-aircraft cannons got into the zone, the more daring they were to shoot. There were even some guys with excellent artillery skills who dared to shoot the dead zone between the ships. As long as it wasn't aimed at the upper deck of their own ship, the 40mm anti-aircraft cannon couldn't penetrate the thick side of the ship. Instead, it could kill the mantis that was about to reach the ship. Of course, there were also people who would take care of the mantis that actually reached the ship. After all, this was a world where magic and technology coexisted. On every Alliance warship, there was a counter-assault team with different levels of professionals in proportion to eliminate the enemy powerhouses that reached the ship. The mantis that was on steroids could be considered powerhouses for the time being. At the very least, ordinary Alliance soldiers who only knew how to use guns and cannons couldn't deal with them. Seeing that the Alliance's rookies had finally stabilized the battle line, Queen CIA's cold expression softened a little. She hooked her finger behind her, and her 3rd sister immediately understood. The Queen has ordered the 4th and 5th Wind Elemental Legions to temporarily retreat. The defeat of these creatures that could already be called Mantis Demons, and the incomparably pitiful horde airships that were forced to fight by the brainless roar in the sky above Orgrimmar turned into fireballs and crashed. This made the horde like a vicious dog that was forced into a corner and could only bark frighteningly, unable to do anything else. The last step of the focusing rainbow operation, activate. Duque said softly. It's time to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. With so much foreshadowing, of course, the orcs were finished. 30 years ago, the orcs invaded Azeroth, opening the prelude to war and destruction. Duque definitely wanted to end all of this. As a transmigrator, how could he not know that Gurus had built a huge underground military fortress in the Raging Flame Rift in Orgrimmar's Dark Alley area? For ordinary enemies, Duque might as well let the Alliance train their troops and attack them or something. After all, after the death of the idiot Lich King, the Alliance didn't have any decent attacks. If the goal was total annihilation, then there wouldn't be so much trouble. In the sky, the Dalajan was blocking the southeast, and Naxxramas was approaching from the northwest. Chapter 1968. Looking down from the sky, one could see that this was like a hunt. With the two sky fortresses as the core, the Alliance's fleet began to bombard all the tribal targets around them. As long as they saw a humanoid creature, they would immediately fire a cannonball. The cannons were at least 100 millimeters in diameter or machine guns. On the ground, countless elemental creatures appeared. It was the Fire Elemental Army commanded by Major Domo Executus. With the inverted triangular-shaped Fat Fire Elemental as the main force, more than 100,000 elemental creatures slowly advanced, burning everything they could see. The Alliance finally sent in land troops, allowing Agrima's mutated orc army to finally have a place to fight. They let out muffled, inhuman howls as they charged crazily at the fire elementals. If they subconsciously looked down, they would see colorful insects crawling out from all corners of the dry and cracked red earth, fleeing in all directions with the goal of leaving Agrima. Unfortunately, after being transformed by the Blackheart water in Yashaji's heart, they could no longer be called normal creatures. Not only did the mutated orcs' bodies become uglier, but Yashaji's negative emotional energy also poured into their minds. There was no right or wrong, no self-will, only rage or fear that needed to be vented. What they met head-on was a huge wave of flames created by thousands of fire elementals. The 10-meter-tall wave of flames advanced at every moment, spewing tongues of flame that could burn everything. There was no pity, no hesitation. These fire elementals with weak self-will faithfully carried out their commander's orders. The highly intelligent fire demons were behind them, ordering them around. Something that had never happened in the past 10,000 years was a large group of earth elemental creatures acting as the fire demons' bodyguards. Not every mutated orc had such a violent spirit. Yashaji's negative emotions were diverse. There were mutated orcs who charged to their deaths out of fear, and there were orcs who retreated out of fear. These mutated orcs who had lost their courage screamed and used their sharpened claws to dig into Agrima's towering brick and wood walls, quickly climbing over. Many of them even broke through the walls supervised by the Kukuran guards and escaped into Agrima. They crazily slaughtered any creature that stood in their way. This caused new chaos. Despair, terror, panic, doubt. The pros and cons of the seven fiends were all revealed at this moment. Just as the Orthodox tribe of Orgrimmar fell into chaos, Naxxramas finally arrived at the top of Kalimdor's largest city, which had been built for 15 years and was hailed as the symbol of the tribe's spirit. Orgrimmar was so huge that it almost occupied the entire northern part of Duroder. In real life, Orgrimmar wasn't a small town that could be reached in a few minutes on horseback. Under the management of 2 generations of great chieftains, Orgrimmar was 12 kilometers long from east to west and 8 kilometers wide from north to south. Due to the mountains behind it, the zigzagging city boundaries made it difficult to calculate the area. It was this city that was close to 100 square kilometers that was now under the Alliance's siege. Every single orc who was still sane cried out in alarm when the flying fortress's shadow covered half of the city. They could hear their voices breaking with fear. They could sense the animosity from the Alliance. There was no persuasion, no propaganda. Everything was different from what they knew of the Alliance. They still remembered when Sar was great chieftain, the alliance gave him almost unreserved support. If there was no food, they would give him food. If there was an injury or illness, they could borrow priests and doctors to cure their addiction to the devil's blood. When Sar said he wanted to go to Nagran to save people, the alliance gave him a ship without hesitation. The alliance used to be so kind. Unfortunately, their unwillingness blinded their hearts. They envied the good life of the alliance people to the point of going crazy, and their ambition fueled their arrogance. At this time, a madman who advocated war resonated with their hearts. If there was no food, no territory, then they would just rob. Everything was so natural. They raised the banner of tradition and followed the madman to start the war. They saw the alliance's retreat as weakness, and the small benefits they seized as the prelude to victory. When the alliance revealed its fiercest claws, the group of orcs who were frogs at the bottom of a well discovered that they seemed to have provoked an opponent that they absolutely could not provoke. Was Garrush wrong to be great chieftain? Did we make a big mistake? We shouldn't have declared war on the alliance? Ancestor, is Orgrimmar going to be destroyed? Are we going to die? Are the orcs going to be finished? All kinds of negative emotions spread throughout the city, and screams rose and fell continuously. Other than the rough and angry shouts of the Ququran guards, there was weakness everywhere. So what if Yashaji gave them a stronger body? They couldn't fly. This situation where they couldn't even resist, not even put up a last fight, was what made the orcs feel the most despair. Under the despairing gazes of nearly 1,000,000 orcs, the huge base of Naxxramas that destroyed the Twilight Fortress fell off another layer. Everyone watched in horror as the huge black metal block that was bigger than 10 chieftain halls fell from the sky, aiming at the dark alley in the center of the city. Boom! Boom! It was a loud noise that could shatter the sky and the earth. Every pebble on the ground of Orgrimmar trembled, and in the next moment, they were directly shaken into the sky by the vibration. After being stepped on by countless people, the already solid ground was like a domino. After shattering into countless small pieces, it flew rapidly. From the inside out, it spread all the way. In the next moment, it caused the most exaggerated explosion in Orgrimmar's history. It was a dazzling light that could blind people's eyes. The ear-piercing buzzing made everyone lose their hearing and balance, and their ears were filled with buzzing sounds. After a moment of dizziness, the strongest survivors barely opened their eyes, only to find that in that instant, the explosion had destroyed most of the city, and all the buildings were directly blown away. Dozens of streets were all razed to the ground, and every ruin was screaming and groaning in the flames. The raging fire that engulfed the entire city spread further with the wind blowing from the east to the west. The city that was once full of orc aesthetics was now completely gone, and there were shocking cracks everywhere, as if it had experienced a terrible earthquake. No, even an earthquake couldn't have such amazing destructive power. This was a complete annihilation of the orcs. The remaining orcs had not yet reacted to this earth-shattering explosion when they immediately felt the ground start to shake again. What was this? Chapter 1969. The scorching air current carried the shockwave of the explosion and blew General Nazgûl, who had just climbed up from the ground, away. As burly as he was blown away in the stronghold deep underground and tumbled a few times. One could imagine how terrifying the attack power of the big bomb was. A large area of the underground stronghold collapsed. When the stronghold was built, there was no expectation of such a terrifying impact. The orcs were only wary of the Alliance's demolition team, but they didn't think that the Alliance would throw a fake, tactical nuclear bomb. Nazgûl crashed through several walls and finally stopped when he hit a rock stratum. His whole body slammed into it, and then he fell into a crack in the rock stratum that was 5 stories high. His body, which had been greatly strengthened by Yashaji's power, was not invincible. He covered his bleeding forehead and climbed up from the ground. He immediately noticed that the stones on the ground were spinning strangely, as if they were dancing some ridiculous dance. The shockwave from the explosion had clearly stopped, although the center of the explosion had ignited a fire. But the temperature under his feet was no less than the center of the explosion. No, this was even worse than that. Gurus Hellscream finally noticed the anomaly as well. The air was filled with the familiar smell of sulfur. It was as if he was in a dragon's lair and was being stared at by an adult ancient dragon. The dragon's breath was so hot that it seemed to be able to burn everything. The dragon's mouth was filled with flames that seemed to be able to burn everything. He had been building his underground stronghold ever since he became the great chieftain. For this stronghold, he had taken away a large number of laborers from various races. And Magatha had helped him transfer these laborers in the name of fighting against the Alliance. The huge underground stronghold was very, very deep. Even a 100-ton bomb like this couldn't blow through and collapse the entire stronghold. Perhaps the layers closest to the ground would become a mess, but as long as the deepest underground palace was fine, Gurus was confident that he could use this underground stronghold to kill all the Alliance invaders and drain every drop of blood from their bodies. At that moment, Garush felt two pairs of eyes on him. It was the gaze of Duke Marcus, whom he hated the most. It was as if there was a holy elephant of Duque standing in the middle of a temple in the void, and Duque was holding his father's shackles with one hand while staring at him with a mocking gaze. There was even a hateful smile on his face as if he was looking at a clown. Duke Marcus, I know you're watching. Come at me if you can. Come and kill me. The Kukuran guards looked at their boss, dumbfounded, as though they had gone crazy for no reason. In fact, it seemed to everyone that Garush was a little jumpy lately. This time, it was different. A voice really came from the void. It was the voice of their strongest enemy. Kill you? I will. But I'm not interested in crawling into a rat hole and pulling out such a dirty person like you. Duque's voice rang out. It sounded like an ethereal voice coming from a tall building in the morning mist. It was full of hallucinatory colors, but every word was clear. What? You dare to call such a majestic fortress a rat hole? The brainless roar exploded. Duque did not answer him. Instead, he mocked, you know what? When a ship is about to sink, the first thing to run out is definitely a rat. Hey, what do you mean? Answer me. You bastard Duque. Garush roared angrily, but received no response. No, that was not entirely true. Duque responded in another way. Rumble. Rumble. The entire Orgrimmar trembled. Even the entire mountain range that Orgrimmar was attached to was trembling. The terrifying heat began to scorch the lowest level of the underground fortress. So hot. So hot. The Kukuran guards who drank the Yasha Blackheart water were not immune to elemental damage, nor did they completely cut off their sense of pain. They were still living creatures. They could be hurt, afraid of pain, and they could die. When the lowest level of the underground fortress was torn apart like a fragile biscuit by the sudden appearance of the underground camp, Duque's trump card finally showed its brilliance. Bang! It was lava with a temperature of nearly 1,200 degrees Celsius. And it was definitely not normal fire elemental energy. The flames were violent and the temperature was as high as 8,000 degrees Celsius. Not good. If we don't run, we'll be burned to death. If it was any other situation, perhaps the brainless roar would have killed a few deserters on the spot to warn the others. Unfortunately, in the face of such unreasonable heat, if they did not want to be burnt to a crisp, the only way was to run. Just as Duque had mocked, they ran towards the ground. At this time, the brainless roar finally understood how Duque had done it. No one would have the imagination to imagine that the Lord of Fire, Duque, would be so generous. Duque had directly pumped a large amount of lava from the land of fire south of Mount Hyjal through a tunnel dug by Oro's children, through half of Azhara and into Agrima. If Duque was a true god, perhaps he would have done what the will of Azeroth had done and used the lava from the deepest part of the planet to destroy Agrima. Unfortunately, Duque was not, so he could only settle for the next best thing and use the lava from the land of fire to destroy Agrima. The earth rose in the midst of the rumbling. The tribesmen in the ruins of Orgrimmar did not die immediately. Like the snakes, rats, and ants, they desperately tried to escape the city that they wanted to protect with their lives just a day ago. They screamed and cried. They could not bear the sorrow, pain, and fear in their hearts. In the face of such an apocalyptic disaster, the power of mortals was so insignificant and powerless. Bang, bang, bang. A new crimson mountain replaced Orgrimmar. It grew taller and taller, spewing lava and thick black smoke in all directions. The lava that flowed out of the volcano destroyed everything in its path, whether it was the once majestic palace, the sturdy city walls, or the lifeless bodies. After dropping the bomb, Naxxramas, the Dalajan, and the Alliance fleet had already left the sky above Agrima at full speed. The nearest airship was 3 kilometers away from Naxxramas. At this time, almost all the big shots of the Alliance had gathered in Naxxramas. They were not projections, but in person. Everyone had come under Duque's invitation to witness the destruction of the Horde. Duque's gaze seemed to look beyond the present and into the future. His voice was filled with a sense of holiness and determination. Once, Agrima represented the rebirth of the Orcs, the rise of the new Horde, and the freedom from the control of the Alliance. In the past, strong enemies were waiting, and the Alliance had no chance to act. Now, the Alliance will take this opportunity to completely destroy the symbolic capital of the Horde. Chapter 1970. Be it now or in the future, even if the Beastmen have the chance to set foot on this land again, they won't be able to rebuild their city in its original location. This time, we will use the destruction of Agrima to tell any intelligent race on planet Azeroth that whoever dares to follow the Burning Legion or the ancient gods will be wiped off the face of the planet by the Alliance. Kill them all. Leave none alive. Duque declared as the commander of the Alliance. Whoever wants to destroy the planet and make it impossible for everyone to live, we will kill them first. Just then, an even more powerful wave of lava spewed out from the crater. Dazzling flames exploded in the middle of the battlefield. It was a flare brighter than the sun. At the same time, countless roaring lava balls flew out, dragging more land into the burning world of fire. This was not a planet-level attack. The lava in the Land of Fire was not endless. Seeing that it was about time, Duque ordered the Land of Fire to stop. Agrima and Garusha's underground strongholds were destroyed together. But Garrosh was not done yet. High energy response. It's a shadow element. Enemy attack. The messenger's voice turned from surprise to fierce. This time, there was no need for the messenger to report. All the big shots of the Alliance saw that in the airspace ahead, a scouting frigate had been destroyed by a shadow element light cannon. Boom! The dazzling light caused the dimmed battlefield to suddenly light up again. It was as if night had turned into day in an instant. Duque pursed his lips. Sally broadcasted to the whole Alliance, including those families. Sally understood what Duque was implying. At this time, countless people in the Eastern Kingdom and in the backlands waiting for news from the front lines were pleasantly surprised to see the magic mirrors in the squares suddenly change. The Battle of Agrima was the most important thing for everyone. Due to the information restrictions, everyone could only see the situation in the backlands. News about Duroder was not allowed to be reported. On the screen, a giant wind city of the tribe was being destroyed by a volcano. People of the Alliance rejoice. During the siege of the Horde's capital, Orgrimmar. During Operation Focusing Rainbow, the Alliance dropped a super bomb made of 100 tons of TNT on the Horde. The commander of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, even summoned a terrifying volcano to destroy the Horde's capital, Orgrimmar. Everyone, please take a look. Back then, the Alliance lent the Horde a ship to cross the endless sea to the west. Then, the Horde spent 15 years building the main city of Orgrimmar on this red land. It's now history. However, we used magic bombs to destroy Theramore and spread the flames of war to every member of the Alliance. The main culprit, Gurus Hellscream, who calls himself the chief of the Orthodox tribes, has yet to be executed. On the screen, dazzling flames had already exploded in the center of the battlefield. There was no need for the higher-ups of the Alliance to give the order. The fleets at the front line were already attacking the enemy. Following the roar of the 400mm and above cannons, A mushroom cloud rose up from the red earth, bringing with it an endless amount of smoke and dust. The shockwave pushed the reddish-brown dust cloud over, blowing away tons of dust and debris. Soon, everyone saw a huge black shield rise around a huge figure, blocking all the explosions, dust, and shockwaves outside. That was the power of Yashaji. A higher level of mystery easily rejected the low-level energy reaction. Each heavy cannon weighed more than a ton and nearly 100 kilograms of gunpowder. However, the terrifying explosive power that could blast a 5-story tall tower into the sky was still unable to do anything to the black light shield on Garusha's body. Facing the direct attack of the cannons, the shield only bent slightly and shook for half a second before returning to normal. They noticed that, beside Garush, a huge, ugly heart was beating powerfully. The broken blood vessels of the heart were like a whirlpool, crazily absorbing evil nutrients from the surrounding air. The despair of the Horde members before they died, the wails of their souls, and their painful mental fluctuations. All the negative emotions became nourishment for Yashaji's heart. After being transformed by the heart, it was injected into Gurus' body. Although Gurus rushed out of the underground fortress in an extremely disheveled appearance, with more than a dozen charred places on his body, he was ruthless to others and also to himself. He actually used Bloodhowl to cut off the injured parts of his body. Then, in the high-magnified vision of the magician's eyes, his damaged muscles were like wriggling earthworms, connecting together and healing at a speed 100 times faster than normal. Many of the Alliance civilians who saw this scene retched. In the command hall of Naxxramas, Duque stood up calmly. "It's time. Let's end this." The Alliance's heroes were mobilized for the first time in a long time. Whenever conventional combat power could not defeat the enemy, it was time for the heroes to go out. They were both the leaders of the Alliance and the glory of the Alliance. Looking at the Alliance leaders gathered in front of the portal, the soldiers in the command hall stood up in unison, saluted, and gave the highest respect and blessings to the heroes who were about to go out to battle. This time, Duque could use Otter's Guardians or the 5 Guardian Dragons of the Dragon Sleep Temple. He gave up this right. For no reason, he just wanted to put an end to the 30-year war and grievances between the Alliance and the Horde as a member of the Alliance. As for Brainless Roar, Duque had already cut him down too much. It wasn't to say that he had cut him down to a dog, but this was no longer an equal battle. In this life, there was no great uprising of the Horde. Thrall might have tried, but Thrall, he should have died in the volcanic eruption. Duque didn't have time to sigh. If he could use the volcano move, he had no intention of leaving anyone alive. In the original time and space, the Battle of Orgrimmar, the ultimate dungeon in the mystery of Pandaria time point, had as many as 14 bosses, a considerable number of which were war machines made by goblin craftsmen. Now Duque couldn't see any of them. In order to prevent the Alliance from invading with mechanized troops, a certain brainless person deliberately made the entrance and exit of the underground stronghold very narrow. In the end, not only did he fail to trick the Alliance, but he also tricked himself in the volcanic eruption scenario. Now there were only 5 bosses left, which was really hilarious. Seeing Duque and his party appear, Gurus let out a deafening roar. "Duke Marcus, you despicable person, don't you dare to fight me fair and square? Sure, first throw away that piece of rotten meat next to you called Yashaji. How about we fight fair and square?" The corner of Duque's mouth curled up into a cold smile. Chapter 1971. A fair duel was a joke. This was more like the weak hoping to use moral coercion to ask the strong to deliberately pull their combat power to the same level as the weak. In reality, even if the real strong lowered their power level, they could still achieve victory through their rich experience and unconstrained fighting methods. Different races, different backgrounds, different experiences, different ways of growing up. There were too many differences that created a myriad of differences in individuals. With such differences, how could there be fairness? Speaking of which, I, Dumok, transmigrated openly and relied on my own memory, wisdom, and power to fight to this day. Why should I give up my advantage and fight you openly? What a joke. Duque's disdain could be conveyed to brainless Roar without words. You destroyed my tribe, you bastard. Why can you steal the power of an elemental lord, but I can't use the power of an ancient god? Brainless Roar roared and shot Duque with a light cannon. The terrifying mental energy that lingered on the battlefield was too majestic. There was no need to deliberately collect it to create a huge amount. The huge and thick black energy cannon was terrifying the moment it was fired. It could probably stuff a destroyer into it. Duque did not make a move. A golden and benevolent figure appeared beside Duque. It was the former Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonso's Fail. He raised a golden staff that was in the shape of a cross and had a ring on the top of the staff at the right time. Blessing. The classic staff of a priest. As a heroic spirit that relied on the magic net, Alonso's could change his shape or the appearance of his equipment at will. This was the simplest transmogrification. But what he liked the most was this staff that had a special meaning to priests. The era when this staff was created had a special meaning to him. It was the most glorious era of the Holy Knight profession that he had single-handedly created. Blessing glowed with holy light and formed a huge hemispherical light shield that blocked in front of Duque. All the dark power that poured down was refracted and reflected away, dissipating in the air. Brainless Roar did not know that this scene was being broadcasted to the entire alliance and the various races that had joined the Horde. Perhaps to him, power was power. There was no distinction between attributes, nobility, or lowness, only strength and weakness. Having always believed in the traditional concept that history was written by the victors, Garusha's way of thinking was simpler and more violent. If he had the upper hand, there was nothing wrong with him doing so. Unfortunately, he wasn't. Without any scruples, he was now covered in a black aura, and any random move he made would sound like the howling of a chilly wind. No matter how one looked at it, he was the ultimate representative of a major villain. Originally, in history, for the sake of justice and rules, the Alliance and the Pandaren organized a grand trial. Braindead Howl had killed so many people, committed war crimes, and even played the ancient god Yashaji. Braindead Howl, who had committed such a huge crime, had no choice but to give face to the tribe and only be sentenced to life imprisonment. In the end, he still managed to escape. Please forgive me for not being able to accept such moronic and idiotic behavior. The live broadcast of the duel was, in fact, a public trial. Since there was no tribe in the way, as long as Brainless Roar fully demonstrated his actions, then justice would be achieved. There would be no mercy. The outcome of this trial had long been decided. Duque was just going through the motions. The tribe has existed for more than 30 years. It's time for a grand curtain call, Duque said calmly in his heart. On the other side, Braindead Howl's light cannon could not deal with Duque. His loyal subordinates roared and pounced on him. General Nazgrin, Markarok, Siege Craftsman Black Isada. These Horde bosses, who had escaped the fate of being destroyed along with the underground fortress, continued to show their loyalty. For the Horde. General Nazgrin roared and rushed over. For the Alliance. The one who faced him was not his old rival, General Taylor. Sorry, Taylor was not qualified to appear in such an occasion. In front of him was Tyrion Fordring. Tyrion, who was often teased by Duque as His Majesty, was not considered old. He was in his early 50s, and despite his white hair, he was still quite good at fighting. Nazgrin had not been specially enhanced. He was still a pure orc warrior. His strength came from his experiences. It was rare that Tyrion did not use his surging holy light to blast Nazgrin with Ashbringer. Right now, the Empress Dowager was more like a warrior, fighting Nazgrin with the simplest of skills. In terms of seniority, Nazgrin should not have been the one to challenge Tyrion. After all, he was now the chief paladin of the Alliance. He and his Ashbringer had become one of the benchmarks of the Alliance. Just like how Duque had come down to fight Braindead Howl, this battle that was about to destroy the Horde had a special meaning to it. This was the privilege of the older generation of the Alliance, who had directly endured the invasion of the Orcs. They had risen during the second battle at the Dark Portal and became the core of the Alliance. Now that the horde was about to end, they had to personally wrap things up. That was why the one who blocked Markarok was Gavin Rad. His wind sword had become slightly weaker because Queen Sylvanas had freed Prince Thundrin and wanted to take him in as her subordinate. Gavin Rad temporarily replaced his wind sword. But even with the most ordinary of hammers, he could still suppress Markarok with the skills he had learned on the battlefield for 30 years. Moreover, this shameless thing still had different ideas from the other 5 Silver Saints. After failing to sleep with 2 women at night, Gavin Rad obediently submitted to Duque and obtained eternal life. Now, he was more like a bug. He had the body of an 18-year-old, the experience of a 50-year-old, and the ability to combine holy light and lightning attacks at the same time. Even after Markarok had been strengthened by Asha's power, he was still being suppressed by Gavin Rad with an epic hammer. Dressed in golden plate armor, Gavin Rad merely dodged to the side and avoided Markarok's sweeping attack by a hair's breadth. The next second, a hammer hit the Gurus adjutant's face. Holy light mixed with lightning exploded on Markarok's enlarged face, and violent elemental turbulence swept across the red ground. Markarok's giant body was sent flying more than 10 meters away by the impact of the hammer. Only after rolling a few times did he finally stop, amidst the shocked cries of the Kyukaran guards. "Yo kid, you followed the wrong boss. People who use such evil powers will not have a good ending." Gavin Rad mocked. "You know nothing about the horde." Markarok let out an angry roar and charged at Gavin Rad again. Chapter 1972. There was no chance to bring out the large war machines that Garush had prepared in the underground fortress. For example, the Iron Battle Scorpion. Similarly, in this life, Duke Mu did not give Brainless Roar enough time to corrupt the entire Splendid Valley, so there was no Fallen Guardian group of bosses in history. In addition, Duque drove the horde to Pandaria, so Brainless Roar had no time to do any side quests, so there was no Bloodthirsty Sock, the primitive dinosaur boss that was brought back from the giant beast island. Apart from a few die-hard followers around Garush, he still made some achievements like in history. For example, the Dragon Maw clan that had revived the horde. In this life, the Dragon Maw clan declined with the death of the patriarch Zuluhid in the World War II. It was not until the Cataclysm that the Dragon Maw clan returned to the stage of history after Garush destroyed the Twilight Fortress in the Barren Lands. Overseer Zyra and Garush formed a very close relationship during the Twilight Highlands incident, and she and her Dragon Maw orc promised loyalty to Garush's cause. The terrifying ancestor Dragon Garush was a direct descendant of the dragon race's Cataclysm ancestor. Zyra rode on its back and appeared in front of the Alliance's powerhouses as a boss. Oh! The group of Alliance powerhouses sighed. It had nothing to do with them again. Duque did not care about what kind of deal they made in order to get into the battle. In any case, what Duque wanted was an absolute crushing and destruction. Basically, every time a powerhouse jumped out from the Horde's side, there would be a corresponding powerhouse on the Alliance's side who would rush up and drag them to the side to fight. As soon as Garush appeared, a countess on a platform on Naxxramas jumped off a building. Everyone in the Alliance knew what Countess Katrana was. Now the Countess jumped off a building. Under the acceleration of gravity, the Countess's falling speed increased. The strong wind blew her black hair wildly, and her red dress looked like a falling comet from a distance. The Countess did not stretch her neck and let out a long roar. In the blink of an eye, the clothes on the Countess' back turned into a pair of black wings. Her slender and fair limbs turned into dragon claws covered in fine and solid black scales. Her seductive body was rapidly expanding. It only took about 3 seconds for her to transform from a human to a dragon. When she landed on top of Garaka's head, Onyxia had completely transformed into her dragon aspect form. Garaka's, who lacked the experience of fighting a dragon aspect, was caught off guard. Just as it raised its huge head, it realized that its wings had been hit by the opponent's signature, Deep Breath. After being reinforced and strengthened by the fire elemental realm, the progenitor dragon's entire wing was carbonized when it exploded into a sky full of sparks. The progenitor dragon let out a pained roar. Even after tumbling for more than 300 meters, it still could not stabilize its body. In the end, it was still a primitive creature, unlike the five-colored dragon race. The chromatic dragons were strengthened by the titans, and the truly powerful wyverns could even control the elements to soar in the sky. No one would have thought that the wyvern boss of the horde would be at an absolute disadvantage right from the start. As Garakas tumbled to the ground, Onyxia used her incomparably proficient flying skills to hover and use her 4 sharp claws to remove parts from Garaka's body. When the progenitor dragon crashed to the ground, creating a huge crater on the red ground, Onyxia also added 2 more legs. She directly used her considerable weight and the kinetic energy brought by the acceleration of gravity to press down on the opponent's lower back in one breath. Crack! It was the crisp sound of vertebrae breaking. Without giving the opponent any room to fight back, the black dragon's mouth, which had countless sharp teeth, had already bitten Garaka's neck. At the same time, Overseer Zyra was split in half by the black dragon's claws. The people of the Alliance could barely see a black shadow flash down. When they could see it clearly, the scene that decided the outcome of the battle had already appeared on the screen. They only saw the black dragon princess, wearing a huge Alliance cloak, defeating the opponent as a mount of the Alliance. Regardless of whether it was the siege craftsman Haisu or the Karakasi heroes of the Mantis Demon, they were all hammered and killed one by one in front of this group of powerful people from the Alliance. This was not a battle of the same level. On the other side, Duque was still playing with brain-dead roar. In the distance, more crown guards who had escaped from the volcanic eruption madly rushed over, but they were killed by the Alliance elites led by the Silver Hand. In the center of the battlefield, there were not many Horde warriors still fighting. After another fierce clash, Theon used Ashbringer to suppress Nazgûl. Looking at the Horde general who was already riddled with scars, he finally could not bear to see him die. He suddenly whispered, "Surrender! You are not one of those madmen who disregard everything and the lives of the people for the sake of power. You are different from them. If you surrender, I swear in the name of the Holy Light that the Alliance will give you fair treatment." Nazgûl, of course, knew that he could not defeat Theon, but his answer was incomparably loud and clear. "I am Nazgûl, the fist of the chieftain, the Horde's commander. If today is the day I die, then I will die gloriously on the battlefield for the Horde. Is it worth it?" Theon was a little anxious. "Worth it? There is no such thing as not worth it. I am very happy that I am fighting a glorious battle with you. In the end, I stand on the side of the chieftain because this is my mission. If the person who defeats me in the end is you, I will also be very happy. Gurus will lead the orcs to destruction. Are you willing to do that? If the orcs are really going to go extinct, it is the will of the heavens. Otherwise, there will always be a hero who will lead the orcs and our world to prosperity." With that, another fierce clash ensued. This time, Tyrion had miscalculated. In his imagination, it would be another clash of swords and axes. But at the last moment, he did not know if Nazgûl's legs gave way, or if Theon still thought that Nazgûl was at his peak. Under the fierce attack of Ashbringer, it directly hit a large gap in Nazgûl's weapon. This directly broke his weapon. This, after Ashbringer, which was like a door plank, slashed out, it did not stop at will. Ashbringer, which represented the extreme path of toughness, faithfully carried out the power that its master had given it. With a flash of golden light, a huge wound appeared from the right side of Nazgûl's neck to the left side of his abdomen. There was no pain, no regret. On the rough green face that was unique to the orcs, Nazgûl smiled. "Although I have lost, it is still honorable. Luck, Gar." Theon suddenly felt a pain in his heart. He had defeated countless enemies, but he had never thought that he would feel like his heart was being cut by a knife after being defeated. Chapter 1973. At the side, Duque, who saw this scene, secretly sighed. A true hero did not differentiate between strong and weak, noble or lowly, race or age. In the face of a powerful enemy that could not be defeated, perhaps 99. 99% of people would choose to be a coward for life, but there would always be 1 in 10,000 people who would choose to stand up. Such people were often called heroes by the world. In Duque's memory, in the original history, Nazgûl appeared as a small soldier in the wrath of the Lich King. Then, during the Cataclysm, he became an army soldier, equivalent to the Alliance's Knight Captain. Finally, during the Mystery of Pandaria, he became the general of the Expeditionary Army. He could be said to be the leader of the Expeditionary Army. Some of the players who played with Duque before he transmigrated were also part of the Horde. Especially in Pandaria, there were all kinds of missions, all kinds of encounters, all kinds of ships, all kinds of sinking. But General Nazgûl was a true hero. This warrior caused all kinds of trouble and asked various heroes to clean up the mess, but at the critical moment he showed the courage, ability, and wisdom that a warrior should have. It was no exaggeration to say that Nazgûl's entire experience formed an inspirational story of an ordinary orc soldier who grew up step by step to become an independent Horde general. In fact, Duque knew that General Nazgûl was the same as Wajin. There was no difference in their understanding of the Horde. It was just that the path they chose was different. The reason why he said this was because he had a reference by his side, Markarok. Markarok was a traditional orc who was brainwashed by Braindead Roar. They believed that other than Qukaran, any other race, including orcs from other clans, were untouchables. On the other hand, General Nazgûl treated every comrade who fought with him as a companion and a great warrior who grew up with him. Looking at Nazgûl, who was still acting like a human, and the Beastman army that had almost gone crazy, it wasn't easy for him to maintain his rationality under such circumstances, and he still refused to use Yashaji's power. In the past, Duque found it hard to understand why Nazgûl still chose to continue to follow the crazy Garrus even though he was very clear-headed. Later, he found out that it was because Garrus recognized him. For all the orcs who were loyal, it was impossible for them to betray their benefactor. Nazgûl reminded Duque of Grom. In order to repay Duque's kindness, Grom didn't hesitate to give up his identity as the tribe's hero and become Duque's personal spirit after death. Even when the Alliance and the Horde were at war and the Alliance was about to attack his son, Grom chose to remain silent. Duque knew that if he gave the order, Grom would definitely attack Garrus with his axe. Duque didn't do this because it was too cruel for a warrior who was truly worthy of respect. It is the father's fault for not teaching his son properly. But how could a father who had been cut off from his path of return and had no choice but to wander in another world for more than 10 years fulfill his duty of teaching? It was precisely because he knew about Nazgûl's deeds that if there was an uprising, Nazgûl would entrust all his hopes for the future of the Horde to the people he trusted. For a general who had already reached this level, Duque could only evaluate him as someone who was absolutely worthy of respect. Sometimes he felt sad for the Horde. It wasn't that the Horde didn't work hard, but the Alliance had him, Duque, as their boss. In comparison, he couldn't have too high of expectations for Sar. He couldn't blame Nazgûl either. After all, Nazgûl was only a rising star of the Horde. It was already very impressive that he could do this. Seeing that Nazgûl had fallen, Duke floated over from afar and spoke into the ears of Theon and the people around him. The Alliance will bury Nazgûl. This decision made Tyrion and the other righteous people feel a sense of comfort. But Brainless Roar was unhappy. He scolded, "Even after death, the warriors of the Horde will only return to the land of our ancestors. You Alliance pigs have no right to profane the remains of the warriors of the Horde." His words stunned the big shots of the Alliance for a moment. Then they burst into laughter. *CKU. What did you just throw out? *whoosh whoosh whoosh. An axe made of shadow energy tore through the air. It was obviously aimed at Duque. It was a weapon of blasphemy. The weapon of blasphemy, which was refined and shaped by Yashaji's power, missed and exploded where Duque was 1/10 of a second ago. The violent explosion created a small, shadowy energy storm that affected everything within a 30-yard radius. Duque nimbly used Flash to appear in another place. He smiled lightly. "Blasphemy? Sorry. No one blasphemes their ancestors more than you, Brainless Roar." "Oh Garush, your father is grieving, your ancestors are weeping. Don't mention my ball-less father." Brainless Roar attacked again. He stretched out his left hand and grasped in the air. A dark attack filled with negative emotions was unleashed. Despair's Grasp. This was a double special skill that contained mental shock and shadow energy. If an ordinary hero was hit by this, even if they did not die from the violent shadow energy, their minds would be destroyed by the endless negative emotions. In the ancient war between the Titans and the ancient gods, hundreds of guardians of the same level as Alexstrasza had their minds destroyed just like that. They became walking corpses. Duque was not interested in this kind of self-torture. He used Flash again. This time, Duque appeared 30 meters behind Brainless Roar. For the powerful pharaoh, if he did not stop their almost endless teleportation, there would be no need to fight this battle. Ordinary mages had a cooldown time for Flash, and the more they used it, the easier it was for them to make mistakes. After all, Flash was a type of teleportation. The more powerful Pharaoh was, the more he had no such restrictions. This was especially true on the battlefield. If Pharaoh could set up more subtle spatial coordinates, a warrior who relied purely on physical combat would not have the slightest chance of winning. They would definitely be controlled to death. However, the moment Brainless Roar officially absorbed the power of Yashaji's heart, he was no longer a pure warrior. His physical combat skills were still superb. What was even stronger was the power that came from Yashaji. He raised his hand, and a mass of dark energy that completely affected the city burst out from his hands. That was the corrosive vortex, obtained from Yashaji's blood. It looked like the warrior's whirlwind slash. However, every blade of light from the giant axe carried a strong dark aura. Any blade of light could easily cut open the ground, and the surrounding space was dyed in a strange blue and white color. Duque was unmoved. "Sigh. Still not willing to reveal your true face?" Chapter 1974. If Duke wanted to, an ordinary Brainless Roar could really be dealt with a snap of his fingers, and with a pa sound, it would be reduced to ashes without leaving any residue. Regular warriors had no chance of winning against a demigod like Pharaoh, who could turn into elementals. It was like using an axe to chop at the air. It was meaningless. Elementals, on the other hand, could easily crush a warrior. Garush was different. Before, he had no value at all for Duque to make a move. But now, the system had changed his description to Garush, the incarnation of Ashoka. True face? Ha! Duke Marcus, are you so eager to see me slaughter you humans, kill all those damn dwarves, and throw all the elves into the wolves' lair? And those Dreenii who are worse than pigs, ha! You will have a chance. I will chop off your head and imprison your soul in a pathetic skull. I will watch you and your alliance turn into ashes. Brainless Roar was really brainless. This scene was directly displayed in front of the millions of people in the alliance. Who knew how many people cursed on the spot, and even more people clenched their fists tightly. "Oh, the people in your tribe are almost all dead," Duque mocked. In the distance, the mutated Kyukaran guards were still charging over without a care for their own safety. But just the Silver Hand and the Night Elf Sentinels were enough to make them suffer. Not to mention the Kirin Tor mages, who were all Radiant Moon mages. Only the weak will die on the battlefield. I am the son of destiny. Only the powerful beastmen who survive are qualified to stand behind me, Garush roared and transformed. Garush suddenly opened his arms and arched his body. His neck seemed to be broken, and the back of his head touched his back. His swollen muscles finally began to burst, and countless purple-blue veins began to spread out from his shoulders, chest, and thighs. The scene of them wriggling on the surface of his body, as if there were thousands of earthworms rolling under his skin, was simply explosive, enough to make any trypophobia sufferer collapse. Garush's entire body was like a gigantic inflatable doll, and his body rapidly expanded. 1 person tall, 2 people tall, 5 people tall, 10 people tall. In just 10 seconds, the originally 2 5 meters tall burly man had turned into a giant-like monster. The 2 decorative beast fangs on Garush's shoulders had been swallowed by his muscles, and countless spikes grew out of his bones and pierced through his flesh. Blood splattered out, and as soon as it sprayed into the air, clouds of ominous blue and white fog immediately spread out. The pain stimulated Garush's ferocity, causing him to let out a series of barbaric roars that were neither human nor beast. At this moment, if the audience had not seen Garush's true appearance just a moment ago, no one would have recognized this terrifying monster as the great chief of the tribe. Monster! The Alliance audience had a unanimous opinion. Mom, are all tribes so scary? An 8-year-old girl hugged her mother's thigh in horror. Yeah, that's how the big bad guy of the tribe killed your grandfather and grandmother back then. The cruel scene of the battle at the Door of Darkness 30 years ago once again appeared in the middle-aged woman's mind. At that time, she was still a child, and she had witnessed the most brutal massacre in the world. On the other side, a large amount of audience feedback came from Duque's magic net. He could not help but sigh inwardly at Braindead Roar's pig-like opponent. Not only did he have an enigmatic self-confidence and arrogance, but he also had the awareness of entering the ultimate villain boss, but he did not have the strength to respond. The positive image of the tribe that Sal had painstakingly created over the years had been easily destroyed by Braindead Roar. This was completely in line with the Alliance's propaganda needs. In front of the gigantic Garush, Duque looked too small. It felt as if Garush wanted to kill Duque as easily as an elephant crushing an ant. The audience watching this scene through the live broadcast was also worried. Dad, will Commander Marcus die? In Gold Flash City, a little boy tugged at his father's sleeve. The father's left arm was empty, and his long sleeve fluttered in the wind, just in time to be tugged at by his own child. His back was perfectly straight, which was the unique posture of a soldier. On his face, which had a long scar that extended from the left side of his face to the left corner of his mouth, a hearty smile that did not match his resolute face appeared. He used his remaining right hand to touch his son's head. Silly child, don't worry. Lord Marcus is not only the greatest commander of our alliance, but he is also the most powerful human in the world. This has to start from when he, as the weakest mortal, killed the commander of the Burning Legion, Sargeras, who possessed the demigod wizard Medivh. At that time, he was only the lowest-level official wizard. Duque's rise had long been eulogized by countless bards in the Alliance. In the past 30 years, Duque had walked step by step from the grassroots to the pinnacle of the Alliance's power. He had fought in great battles, and finally became a god as a mortal. This story had long been heard by the people of the Alliance. But when it was told in this scene, it just happened to add a sense of history to Duque's battle. No problem. Lord Marcus is a man who has killed 2 ancient gods. Battle achievements were confidence. This sense of glory and pride filled the chests of every member of the Alliance. No one interrupted the father's explanation, and the surrounding people nodded in agreement. Similar scenes were happening in the streets and alleys of various towns in the Alliance, encouraging the new generation of young people to make a declaration of pursuing their dreams towards this great human hero that seemed so far away, yet so close at hand. When I grow up, I want to become a great man like Lord Duke Marcus. The people were eager to see the scene of Duque crushing Garush, but unfortunately, the live signal began to deteriorate, and Sally Whitemane had to explain on the spot. The Horde's great chief Garush used a large amount of evil god power, which interfered with the magic transmission signal. I'm sorry, the transmission may be interrupted at any time. There was no way around it. Even if Duque filled Azeroth with all kinds of black technology talents, there would still be a situation of unbalanced technological development. Not every world had Da Vinci or Edison. Some things, even if one knew the direction, still needed a huge amount of practice and that 1% inspiration to cross the chasm of failure and set foot on the other side of victory. In fact, even with modern camera equipment, it was destined that the next scene would not be seen. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.